The crown prince blanched, the weight of the moment finally sinking into his bones. His earlier arrogance crumbled in the face of such unflinching defiance. "You dare," he stammered, his voice a trembling mixture of outrage and disbelief. Alaric Bloodcrown met his gaze, his crimson eyes aglow with unwavering determination. "Dare?" he echoed, voice calm and resolute. "No, your highness. I act." He turned to the gathered nobles, his voice ringing with clarity and purpose. For generations, the noble houses of the Blood Jewel Kingdom have borne the burden of sacrifice and service, our blood spilled to sustain this realm. Yet those who sit the throne have grown complacent, drunk on power, blind to duty. No longer. Tonight, House Bloodcrown declares we shall not kneel before an unworthy sovereign. Catherine stood beside her father, a living embodiment of regal poise and silent strength. Though she spoke no words, her gaze alone proclaimed her allegiance. The Bloodcrown family stood united, unyielding and unafraid. "Treason!" the Crown Prince screamed, his fists clenched in impotent rage. "This is treason. You'll burn for your insolence." But Alaric only offered a faint smile. He gestured to his knights. "Escort the prince back to the palace. See to it he's returned safely, so he may carry our message to the king." The knights bowed and motioned for the prince to follow. Red-faced and humiliated, the Crown Prince stormed from the hall, the echo of armored footsteps behind him. The doors closed with a solemn finality. Alaric turned back to the nobles, his voice low but thunderous. "Blind loyalty has no place in a kingdom ruled by weakness. Those who believe in strength and justice, you know where to stand." A wave of cheers erupted from part of the assembly, others remained frozen, the foundations of their beliefs shaking. A storm was brewing, and this night would mark the first crack in the kingdom's facade. The Bloodcrown family was beloved across the realm. Even the common folk whispered their names with reverence. It would not take long for the royal family to realize just how little true power they held. Within a week, tension escalated into war. The royal family, desperate to maintain their crumbling grip, marched on the Bloodcrown estate with their full might. At the vanguard rode the king himself, flanked by his haughty sons, their confidence swelling as they neared the obsidian gates of their defiant vassals. The royal army stood as a sea of steel, their banners fluttering beneath the moonlight. Rows of soldiers marched in synchronized perfection, a spectacle of war meant to intimidate. The Crown Prince, his pride still wounded from the feast, sneered as he surveyed the estate. "Tonight, the Bloodcrown named eyes," he spat. "Kill the men. Enslave the women. Leave nothing but ash." His younger brother chuckled darkly. "Let me have my fun before they die," he said, licking his lips. His voice oozed depravity. The soldiers roared in approval, blind to the mistake they were making. Before them loomed the Bloodcrown estate, a bastion of power carved from shadow and stone. Unlike the ivory towers of the capital, this fortress exuded an ancient dread. It pulsed with the power of generations, a sanctum not just of strength, but of legacy. The Bloodcrown were not ordinary vampires. They were legends. Unlike the alabaster-haired nobles of other clans, they bore inky black hair and eyes like molten rubies. Beautiful, lethal, and feared, they were the apex of vampiric evolution. Within the estate, Alaric stood at the balcony overlooking the battlefield. His expression was serene, even amused. Catherine stood beside him, a calm storm of elegance and intensity. "Father," she said, her voice edged with excitement, "shall we offer them mercy?" Alaric's lips curved. He turned to his eldest daughter Isolde, an enchantress of poise and power, her beauty as fierce as her blade. "Darling," Alaric said with casual grace, "would you like the honor?" Isolde rose, adjusting the crimson folds of her gown with regal leisure. "It's been far too long since I stretched my legs." "She's going alone?" Catherine asked, brows raised in awe. "She is," Alaric confirmed. "Watch carefully." As Isolde stepped beyond the gates, the battlefield fell into silence. The Crown Prince smirked at the lone woman before him. "Come to surrender, sweetheart?" Isolde's gaze was icy. "I came to offer you mercy. Flee now, or be erased." The soldiers laughed. The prince bowed mockingly. "Kneel now, and I may make you my queen." She sighed. "So be it." Above her, a blood-red crown shimmered into existence, radiating a chilling aura. The ground trembled as crimson tendrils descended, forming a legion of knights wrought from living blood. Their armor glistened like ruby flame, their presence suffocating. "What is this sorcery?" the prince croaked. Isolde's eyes burned. "These are my blood knights. Unlike your men, they do not bleed." "Kill her!" he shrieked. The soldiers charged. Isolde lifted a finger. Her knights surged forward like a tidal wave, blades of blood carving through flesh and steel. Mortal weapons passed harmlessly through them, each kill fed their strength. Screams rang across the field as bodies fell and crimson soaked the soil. The king, alarmed, leapt from his steed. "Enough!" he roared, drawing a great sword pulsing with enchantments. "I will end this."
Isolde turned.
"You may try." Their clash shook the earth. Steel howled against blood-forged power. Yet it became clear, Isolde wasn't being pushed, she was dancing. "You fight with strength," she said softly, parrying with ease, "but you lack purpose." With a single strike, she shattered his blade. The king stumbled, his face etched with disbelief.
"Run," she offered.
He hesitated, then refused.
"Then die." Her blade flashed. Silence followed.
The king crumpled to the ground, crimson pooling around him. Gasps rose from the remaining soldiers. Isolde stepped forward, her voice carrying like thunder. "Flee. Tell the world what fate awaits those who defy House Bloodcrown." The survivors broke and ran, abandoning weapons and honor. The crown prince was dragged away by his brothers, pale and broken. Isolde turned back, the blood crown vanishing. Alaric and Catherine awaited her with quiet pride. "You've surpassed even my expectations," Alaric murmured. The blood crown legacy had just begun its reign. For the Bloodcrown family, the battle had long faded into memory, a confrontation so one-sided it became a footnote in their eternal lives.
Time marched on, unchallenged. The crown prince, however, never forgot.
Decades passed, and he eventually ascended to the throne as king, but peace eluded him. He never married, never trusted, and never truly ruled. Haunted by the specter of his past humiliation, he grew consumed with paranoia. The name Bloodcrown became a whisper in his mind, a presence that stalked his thoughts. Fear festered into obsession. He abandoned the palace, disappearing into the shadows of his own realm to pursue the only goal he had left: vengeance. He delved into dark magic, abducting scholars, sacrificing mages, and scouring every forbidden text he could acquire. Years turned into centuries. Despite all his efforts, the secrets he sought remained out of reach. Yet he endured, kept alive by twisted sorcery, his humanity long since withered away. The world forgot him, but he remembered everything. 1,000 years passed. Now a withered husk clinging to life through vile means, the former prince resided in a crumbling tower lost to time. His once proud bloodline was dead. His name erased from history. Only one purpose burned in his hollow heart: to annihilate the Bloodcrown family. Then, at the edge of despair, he found it. Buried beneath layers of dust and death, he uncovered a tome older than empires, a volume bound in charred flesh and inked in blood. Its contents whispered promises of forbidden power and secrets from beyond the mortal plane. The former king, more monster than man, opened the tome with trembling hands. Within its pages, a ritual. A summoning of an entity so ancient and terrible that even the gods feared to name it. The text spoke of a being born of chaos, one that could rival the oldest bloodlines in raw, destructive might. His sunken eyes gleamed with manic hunger. This was the answer. This was how he would erase the Bloodcrown name from existence. And yet, as he prepared the summoning, a darker thought took root in his diseased mind. Catherine, beautiful, untouchable, the one who had stood silent yet resolute against him centuries ago. He no longer wished to merely destroy her. He wanted to dominate her, break her spirit, and make her suffer endlessly. His cracked lips curled into a grotesque smile. The walls of his tower echoed with deranged laughter as he began the ritual, blind to the doom he now invited upon the world. Years of dark preparation led to this moment.
The tower trembled.
Blood runes glowed on the floor, forming a massive summoning circle filled with the screams of the damned. As he chanted the final words, a tear in reality opened, revealing a realm of endless night, a place of chaos and void. A towering being emerged from the rift, cloaked in shadow, with eyes like burning embers.
"Who summons me?" it thundered.
The prince fell to his knees, his voice reverent and broken. "I am your servant.
Grant me power.
Grant me the strength to destroy the Bloodcrown." The entity loomed over him, its gaze dissecting his soul. "You seek to challenge a line born of ancient blood? Their strength is rooted in eternity. What do you offer?"
The prince didn't hesitate. "Everything.
"My soul, my body, my essence. I offer all."
A dark chuckle echoed from the void. "Very well.
But know this, what you receive may be far more than you can control." A sphere of pure abyssal energy formed in the being's hand.
"Take this vessel.
It will reshape you." The prince reached forward, and the moment his fingers brushed the orb, agony consumed him. He screamed as the entity's power flooded his body, shattering his frail shell and reconstructing it into something unnatural. When it ended, the creature that rose from the summoning circle was no longer a man. Twisted and towering, with obsidian flesh veined in glowing crimson, he radiated a dreadful aura. His voice now echoed with otherworldly resonance. "I am reborn," he whispered. "The blood crown shall fall, and Catherine will kneel." Dark tendrils writhed from his body. His blood jewel ability, once a talent for manipulating dark matter, was now grotesquely amplified. He could summon nightmares from the abyss, shape shadows into living weapons, and bend the laws of nature. With a single motion, the space before him twisted. Monstrous figures emerged, aberrant creatures with jagged forms and eyes devoid of sanity. They knelt at his command. "This is only the beginning," he said, extending his arms as his corrupted energies spread through the land. "To the Bloodcrown estate. Leave nothing but ash in our wake." The beasts roared and charged into the night, their shrieks tearing through the still air. At the estate, the ground trembled. Alaric stood at the highest balcony, gazing into the distance. The horizon was dark, blotted not by nightfall, but by something far more sinister. A monstrous figure approached, towering over the trees. The former prince, now a 6-meter abomination, led the charge. His cracked skin pulsed with chaotic energy, and the orb embedded in his chest throbbed like a cursed heart. "What madness is this?" Alaric muttered. Beside him, an elder knight's expression darkened. "Abyssal constructs. Born from realms where even death dares not tread." The Bloodcrown knights took their positions, clad in red enchanted armor. As they clashed with the monstrosities, blood-red energy flared, but the enemy was unlike anything they'd faced. The abyssal beasts regenerated from wounds, unfazed by mortal steel. "We need the Memphis clan." Another elder shouted. "Only they can absorb this darkness." Alaric gave the order. A raven was sent. Just as the Bloodcrown defenders regrouped, a sudden silence swept the field. An elder knight's voice rang out. "Hold." His words were cut short as a claw sliced through his body, severing him in an instant. A tall figure stepped through the haze, his movements eerily graceful. His claws dripped blood, and his glowing eyes held the thrill of a predator. "I am Razzo," he said smoothly. "Harbinger of death. The Crown Prince sends his regards." The knights braced themselves, but Razzo was a blur, his form flickering between shadows as he tore through the Bloodcrown ranks. Crimson blood stained the ground as his laughter echoed in the chaos. Alaric narrowed his eyes, summoning his own blood-forged warriors. "You want war," he growled. Then faced the full fury of House Bloodcrown. Crimson light ignited across the estate as ancient powers stirred. The war had begun.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Bloodcrown, a family known for their unparalleled strength, capable of dominating not just a kingdom but the entire world. A single elder of their lineage was said to wield enough power to destroy and conquer a continent on his own. But now, one such elder had been slaughtered with such ease that made Alaric doubted whether the fallen was truly from their family. Deep down, however, he knew the truth. This was no stranger, it was indeed one of his own. Alaric turned his gaze toward the monster who called himself Patsu, cutting a bloody path toward the Bloodcrown estate. "Kill him," Alaric commanded, his voice cold and resolute. A high elder nodded in acknowledgement, rising into the air from the castle. The illusory Bloodcrown above his head gleamed ominously, and a torrent of blood surged toward him, enveloping his form. In moments, he stood transformed into a towering Blood Knight, a crimson titan of unholy power. The massive Blood Knight hefted its enormous sword and swung it with terrifying force at Patsu. The dark figure responded in kind, lashing out with his own blade forged of malevolent energy. Their weapons collided in a deafening explosion of power, sending shockwaves that shattered the battlefield below. The clash between the Blood Knight and the Darkborn monstrosity raged, their titanic struggle uprooting the very earth and scattering the ongoing skirmishes like leaves in a storm. This was no ordinary duel, it was a battle of giants, shaking the foundations of the world itself. The ground trembled as the Blood Knight pressed forward, its blade cutting arcs through the air with blinding speed. Each swing carried the weight of centuries of bloodshed, the accumulated essence of countless lives. Yet Patsu stood unfazed. His dark energy coiled around him like living shadows, twisting and snapping at the Crimson Knight. "You are nothing but an ant." Patsu snarled, his voice a guttural growl that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss. He raised his sword, black energy surging along its edge. With a single strike, he met the Blood Knight's blade once more, the resulting impact splitting the sky with a blinding flash of light and darkness intertwined. Alaric watched from the castle, his expression unreadable. The Bloodcrown estate trembled under the force of the battle. Pieces of the ancient stone walls crumbled, falling into the blood-soaked grounds below. "Hold your ground," Alaric muttered to himself, though it was unclear if he spoke to the Blood Knight or to himself. He clenched his fists, feeling the overwhelming power radiating from both combatants. Patsu roared, unleashing a wave of dark energy that sent the Blood Knight skidding backward, gouging massive trenches into the earth. But the Blood Knight stood tall, its glowing eyes burning like twin suns of rage. It lunged forward, blade raised high, intent on cleaving the intruder in two. Patsu smirked, sidestepping with unnatural speed, and retaliated with a slash that tore through the Blood Knight's armor, leaving a gash from which blood oozed like molten lava. The knight staggered but quickly recovered, the wound sealing itself as the blood around it flowed back into place. "You are persistent," Patsu mused, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "But persistence without purpose is meaningless." The Blood Knight did not respond, for it had no words, only the will of the Elder controlling it. It swung again, its strikes growing faster, more desperate, each one aiming to overpower the dark monster before it. But Patsu was relentless, meeting every blow with ease, his movements precise and calculated. It was clear he was toying with his opponent, testing the limits of the Blood Knight's strength. Enjoy exclusive content from Empire. Alaric's eyes narrowed as he observed the battle. "He's stronger than I thought," he admitted to himself, a rare moment of doubt creeping into his mind. Yet, he could not show weakness. Not now. Not while his family's legacy hung in the balance. "Prepare the others," Alaric said, turning to a group of Bloodcrown warriors gathered behind him. "If the Blood Knight falls, we will face him together. He will not walk away from this estate alive." The warriors nodded, their faces grim but resolute. The Bloodcrown would not surrender, not to Patsu, not to anyone. The clash between the Blood Knight and Patsu intensified, shaking the heavens and earth. The Blood Knight lunged again, unleashing a whirlwind of strikes. Each blow sent ripples of crimson energy through the air, carving craters into the earth and scattering debris like confetti. But Patsu moved like a shadow, slipping through the barrage with inhuman grace. His sword, dark and jagged like a shard of the void, countered with brutal efficiency, each swing sending arcs of black energy slicing through the Blood Knight's defenses. The Blood Knight staggered, its towering form flickering as the blood that sustained it struggled to keep pace with the onslaught. Patsu grinned, his fanged smile oozing with cruel satisfaction. "Is this the best the Bloodcrown can muster?" he sneered, driving his sword deep into the Blood Knight's chest. The massive figure convulsed as the dark energy seeped into its core, threatening to unravel the ancient magic binding it. In the distance, Alaric watched in silence, his face a mask of fury and determination. With a wave of his hand, the warriors behind him stepped forward, their eyes glowing with the same crimson light as the Blood Knight. They began to chant in unison, their voices merging into an ominous hymn that made the very air tremble. The Blood Knight suddenly roared, its shattered form surging with new strength as the blood of its summoners flowed into it. The gash in its chest sealed, and its armor solidified, burning brighter than ever before. With a mighty swing, it drove Patsu back, forcing him to skid across the battlefield. Patsu straightened, his smirk widening. "Ah, so there's more to you after all," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. He raised his hand, summoning a storm of black lightning that crackled around him, darkening the sky. "Good. I was starting to get bored." The Blood Knight charged, its renewed strength turning its movements into a blur of crimson destruction. The two forces collided again, their strikes releasing shockwaves that sent nearby mountains crumbling and reduced the estate grounds to an apocalyptic wasteland. Above it all, Alaric stood firm, his mind racing. This cannot end like this. If Patsu wins, it won't just be the Bloodcrown's pride that falls, our very existence will be erased. "Ready the Bloodgate," Alaric ordered suddenly, his voice cutting through the din of battle. The warriors behind him hesitated, their faces blanching. "The Bloodgate, my lord?" one of them asked cautiously. "But the consequences?" "Do it," Alaric snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If we do not act now, there will be no Bloodcrown left to worry about consequences." The warriors exchanged uneasy glances before nodding. They began their preparations, carving sigils into the ground with their blades and spilling their own blood into the grooves. The sigils glowed with an eerie red light, pulsating in time with the battle raging nearby. Patsu, still locked in combat with the Blood Knight, noticed the change in the air. His grin faltered for the first time as he glanced toward the castle. "What are you planning, Alaric?" he muttered, his eyes narrowing. The Bloodgate's activation was nearing completion, its energy building into a vortex of blood and power. Alaric stepped forward, his crimson eyes burning like embers. "You've made a grave mistake, Patsu," he said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "You thought the blood crown would break so easily." With a final surge of energy, the blood gate erupted in a blinding explosion of crimson light, bathing the entire battlefield in its glow. Whatever Alaric had summoned, it was about to change the course of the fight, and perhaps the fate of the world. The crimson light from the blood gate expanded, its glow consuming the battlefield and forcing all within its radius to pause, even Patsu, whose dark energy faltered momentarily in its overwhelming presence. From the vortex of light emerged a figure, neither man nor beast, but a being forged entirely of blood and wrath. It towered over the blood knight, its body a pulsating mass of veins, arteries, and molten essence, exuding a pressure so suffocating that even the earth beneath it began to crack and buckle. The Blood Annihilation Titan. One of the warriors whispered in awe and terror, their voice barely audible over the deafening hum of power. Alaric's expression remained grim as he gazed upon the summoned monstrosity. This was no mere weapon. It was a manifestation of the Blood Crown's legacy, an ancient guardian sealed away for centuries, its very existence a double-edged sword. The Blood Titan let out a roar that shook the heavens, its soundless cry vibrating through the hearts of all present. It turned its glowing, formless eyes toward Patsu, its very gaze a promise of annihilation. Patsu stood still, his smirk now replaced with a look of wary curiosity. "Interesting," he muttered, gripping his blade tighter. Patsu stood still, his smirk now replaced with a look of wary curiosity. "Interesting," he muttered, gripping his blade tighter. "So this is what the Blood Crown hides in its shadows."
A fitting challenge. The Blood Titan wasted no time.
It raised one massive arm, forming a blade from the blood coursing through its veins, and swung it down with the force of a falling star. Patsu leapt back, the ground where he had stood erupting into a geyser of molten crimson. "You think this monstrosity will stop me?" Patsu growled, his voice tinged with amusement and defiance. "I am the harbinger of darkness, the destroyer of worlds." Dark energy erupted from his form, enveloping him in a vortex of shadow. He dashed toward the Blood Titan, his blade meeting the colossal blood-forged weapon in midair. The resulting collision created a cataclysmic shockwave, flattening what remained of the Blood Crown estate and sending both the Blood Knight and the warriors reeling. Alaric shielded his eyes from the storm of energy, his heart pounding.
"This cannot fail. Not here. Not now."
The Blood Titan roared again, the sound like the groaning of a dying world, and pressed forward. Its body continuously regenerated from the blood surrounding it, each wound inflicted by Patsu closing almost instantly. It lashed out with both arms, striking with ferocity that sent Patsu skidding across the battlefield.
For the first time, Patsu stumbled.
He straightened, a thin trickle of dark ichor dripping from his lips. "Impressive," he admitted, his grin returning. "But if this is your best, then you've already lost." Patsu raised his blade high, and the shadows around him coalesced into a towering black spire. The air grew cold as a sinister aura engulfed the battlefield, suffocating and oppressive. Alaric's eyes widened. "He's drawing out more power. Is there no end to him?" The Blood Titan surged forward, undeterred by the growing darkness. Its massive fist slammed into the ground, sending shockwaves that splintered the earth, but Patsu was already moving, his blade cutting through the air in a deadly arc. As the two titans clashed, the very fabric of reality seemed to strain under the weight of their power. The world around them darkened, as if their battle threatened to consume existence itself. In the distance, Alaric's warriors continued to chant, feeding their remaining strength into the Blood Titan. But Alaric knew it wasn't enough. If the Blood Titan fell, there would be nothing left to stop Patsu. Gritting his teeth, Alaric made a decision. He turned to the warriors beside him. "Prepare the Crimson Ascension. I'll give my blood if that's what it takes." The warriors hesitated, their faces pale. "My lord," one began, "if you enact the Crimson Ascension, you—" "I know the cost," Alaric snapped. "But we will not let him walk away from this. Do it now." The warriors bowed, their reluctance giving way to determination. As they began the ritual, Alaric stepped forward, his hands glowing with the same crimson light as the Bloodgate. If the Blood Titan couldn't destroy Patsu, then he would unleash every last drop of the Blood Crown's power to ensure their legacy endured. The final battle had truly begun. As the warriors chanted and the Crimson Ascension ritual began, the battlefield seemed to freeze for a moment. The blood-red glow around Alaric intensified, spreading outward like tendrils reaching for the heavens. The power coursing through him was ancient and volatile, a force only the Blood Crown lineage could harness, and only at the gravest cost. The Blood Titan continued its relentless assault on Patsu, but the Dark Warrior grew more menacing with each passing moment. The spire of black energy he had summoned loomed over him, feeding him with an endless well of malice. He met the Titan's strikes blow for blow, each clash sending ripples through reality itself. Find more chapters on Empire. I see you're finally taking me seriously, Bloodcrown, Patsu called out, his voice carrying over the chaos. He swung his blade with ferocity, carving deep into the Blood Titan's arm, which regenerated instantly. But this is still not enough. He raised his hand, and the black spire pulsed, sending a shockwave of darkness that pushed the Blood Titan back. For the first time, the Titan faltered, its form flickering as though the blood sustaining it was being corrupted. Alarin stepped forward, his body glowing brighter with each step. Crimson sigils appeared on his skin, ancient runes of the Bloodcrown's forbidden magic. His voice joined the chant, deep and commanding, resonating with a power that made the ground tremble. The Bloodgate pulsed once more, its energy funneling directly into Alarin. His form began to change, his body becoming leaner, his features sharper. His hair turned a deep crimson, and his eyes glowed like molten rubies. He was becoming something more, something far beyond mortal comprehension. Patsu turned his gaze toward Alarin, his smirk fading. For the first time, there was a glimmer of caution in his eyes. "Ah, so you've decided to join the fray yourself," he said, his tone quieter but no less menacing. Alarin raised a hand, and the Blood Titan surged forward with renewed vigor, its strikes faster and stronger than before. It slammed into Patsu with unrelenting force, driving him backward and shattering the dark spire behind him. "You underestimated us," Alarin said, his voice reverberating with power. He stepped onto the battlefield, the blood around him forming a crimson aura that crackled with energy. "You thought the Bloodcrown was just a name, a family grown weak over time. But we are more than you can imagine." Patsu snarled, his black energy spiraling around him like a storm. "You're still clinging to this legacy of yours," he spat. "Do you think it will save you from me?" He surged forward, his blade slicing through the air toward Alarin. But before it could reach him, the blood surrounding Alarin solidified into a barrier, stopping the strike cold. With a flick of his wrist, Alarin sent the blood spiraling toward Patsu, forming jagged spears that pierced through the shadows. Patsu roared, his energy flaring as he destroyed the spears, but Alarin was already moving. With a speed that defied comprehension, he closed the distance, his hand glowing with crimson fire. He struck Patsu directly in the chest, sending him hurtling back and embedding him into a nearby cliffside. The Blood Titan roared triumphantly, standing at Alarin's side like a guardian ready to finish the job. Patsu staggered to his feet, his armor cracked, his dark energy flickering. "And yet," he laughed. "You're impressive, Bloodcrown. I'll give you that," he said, blood dripping from his mouth. "But you still don't understand." He raised his arms, and the shadows around him coalesced once more, larger and darker than before. The ground beneath him warped, and the air grew impossibly cold. "I am not here to conquer," he growled, his voice echoing with an unholy resonance. "I am here to destroy. To erase everything you are." Alarin's eyes narrowed as he felt the shift in energy. This was it, the true form of the monster before him. The air thickened with malice as Patsu's transformation reached its zenith. His form expanded, tendrils of darkness radiating from his body like jagged, living shadows. His once humanoid frame twisted into something monstrous, a towering, chaotic amalgamation of armor, claws, and eyes burning with abyssal fire. The ground beneath him cracked and rotted, unable to bear the weight of his corruption. Alarin stared, unwavering, as the full extent of Patsu's power revealed itself. The Blood Titan beside him growled, its molten crimson form rippling with anticipation. Around them, the battlefield had fallen silent, the remaining warriors of the Bloodcrown estate retreating to a safe distance. They were witnesses now, powerless in the face of what was to come. "You speak of destruction," Alarin said, his voice calm but cutting, as if it's an end in itself. "But destruction without creation is hollow, just like you, Patsu. A hollow creature, a mockery of power." Patsu's laughter echoed like a death knell, his voice layered with otherworldly distortion. "You think your pride will save you? Your family? Your blood?" He raised his massive clawed hand, shadows swirling around it, forming a sphere of void energy that pulsed with terrifying might. "Let's see if the Bloodcrown can endure this." Patsu's laughter echoed like a death knell, his voice layered with otherworldly distortion. "You think your pride will save you? Your family? Your blood?" He raised his massive clawed hand, shadows swirling around it, forming a sphere of void energy that pulsed with terrifying might. "Let's see if the Bloodcrown can endure this." He hurled the sphere toward Alarin, its velocity shattering the air like a cannonball of obliteration. Alarin didn't flinch. With a sweep of his arm, the blood surrounding him surged upward, forming a spiraling shield that absorbed the attack. The impact sent ripples of energy in all directions, flattening what little remained of the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, Alaric stood unscathed, his glowing eyes fixed on Patsu. "You're strong, I'll admit," he said, his tone almost pitying. "But strength without control is nothing but chaos." With a single gesture, Alaric unleashed the Blood Titan. The massive being roared, charging at Patsu with unstoppable momentum. Its blade, now glowing with the combined essence of the Bloodcrown warriors and Alaric's ascended power, cleaved through the air, aiming to bisect the monstrous form. With a single gesture, Alaric unleashed the Blood Titan. The massive being roared, charging at Patsu with unstoppable momentum. Its blade, now glowing with the combined essence of the Bloodcrown warriors and Alaric's ascended power, cleaved through the air, aiming to bisect the monstrous form. Patsu caught the blade with both claws, the collision sending a shockwave that tore through the ground and split the sky. The two giants wrestled, their raw power shaking the heavens, but the Blood Titan pressed harder, its form burning brighter with each passing second. As the Titan held Patsu in place, Alaric stepped forward, his entire body radiating an aura of divine crimson light. He raised his hand, and the blood around him coalesced into a massive spear, its surface etched with ancient runes. The weapon hummed with the concentrated wrath of generations. "This ends now, Patsu," Alaric declared. He hurled the spear with impossible force, the projectile cutting through the air like a bolt of judgment. Patsu saw it coming, but the Titan held him firm, its molten arms locking around his grotesque form. The spear struck true, piercing Patsu's chest and detonating in a blinding explosion of crimson light. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, vaporizing the shadows and disintegrating Patsu's monstrous form. His roar of defiance echoed one last time before fading into silence. When the light finally subsided, the Blood Titan stood motionless, its form beginning to dissolve. Alaric staggered, his body flickering as the strain of the Crimson Ascension took its toll. He dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, but his eyes remained fixed on the spot where Patsu had fallen. The battlefield was eerily quiet. The warriors of the Bloodcrown estate approached cautiously, their faces filled with awe and reverence. "Enjoy new stories from Empire." One of them knelt beside Alaric. "My lord, it is done." The Bloodcrown remained standing tall. Alaric closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of relief. But deep within, he knew the battle had cost them dearly. The estate lay in ruins, and the power he had unleashed would leave scars on the land and on his soul. "Begin the reconstruction," he ordered softly, rising to his feet. "We will rebuild, stronger than ever. The Bloodcrown will not fall, not today, not ever." As the warriors scattered to follow his command, Alaric cast one final glance at the remnants of the battlefield. Though Patsu had been defeated, Alaric could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. "There are always more shadows waiting to rise," he thought grimly. "And when they do, the Bloodcrown will be ready." The crimson sky above the Bloodcrown estate began to clear, the oppressive energy from the battle dissipating like a storm passing over the horizon. Yet, the air carried a sense of foreboding, a lingering unease that settled heavily over Alaric as he stood amidst the wreckage. The Blood Titan, its purpose fulfilled, crumbled into a cascade of molten blood, returning to the soil from which it had risen. Alaric's warriors gathered what strength they had left, their eyes fixed on their leader with a mixture of reverence and apprehension. They had witnessed the impossible, a force capable of matching the Bloodcrown's might, and it had left them shaken. "My lord," one of the high elders approached cautiously, his voice low. "The estate is in ruins, and our resources are depleted. This event will not go unnoticed. The other powers will see this as a sign of weakness." Alaric's gaze hardened, his crimson eyes still glowing faintly with residual power. "Let them come," he said coldly. "The Bloodcrown stands, and we will prove our strength again if we must." The elder hesitated before speaking again. "And Patsu, are we certain he is gone?" Alaric turned his eyes toward the massive crater where Patsu had fallen. It was a void of scorched earth and shattered stone, the center of the devastation. He could still feel faint traces of darkness lingering there, faint but undeniable. "No," Alaric admitted after a moment. "Patsu's body may be destroyed, but beings like him do not simply vanish. His essence lingers, scattered and weakened, but not gone. We must be vigilant." The elder nodded solemnly and stepped back, leaving Alaric to his thoughts. As the hours passed, the warriors began the arduous task of clearing the rubble and tending to the wounded. The Bloodcrown estate, though scarred, still stood as a symbol of their resilience. Alaric oversaw the efforts, his mind weighed down by the magnitude of the battle's aftermath. But as the moon rose high in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the ruins, a sense of unease crept into the air once more. Alaric, sensitive to even the slightest shifts in energy, felt it like a cold dagger against his skin. Stay alert, he called to the warriors around him, his voice sharp. Something isn't right. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, a low rumble that grew louder with each passing second. The crater where Patsu had fallen began to glow faintly, a sickly green hue that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. No! Alaric whispered, his fists clenching. Before anyone could react, a shock wave of dark energy erupted from the crater, sending debris flying and knocking warriors off their feet. From the depths of the void, a shadow began to rise, a formless mass of darkness and malice. A voice echoed through the chaos, deep and resonant, carrying an unmistakable edge of mockery. You thought it was over? The voice taunted. Fools! You may have destroyed this body, but my will transcends flesh and form. I am eternal. Alaric's blood ran cold as he recognized the voice. Patsu. The shadow coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape, its eyes glowing with unnatural light. Though diminished, the presence was no less terrifying, its aura still oppressive enough to make the warriors tremble. How? One of them whispered in horror. Patsu laughed, a guttural sound that seemed to echo from the abyss itself. You cannot kill what is already beyond death. This is far from over, Bloodcrown. This was only a taste of what's to come. Alaric stepped forward, his body still weakened from the crimson ascension, but his resolve unwavering. You're a stubborn stain, Patsu, he said, his voice steady. But even stains can be erased. He raised his hand, summoning the blood around him once more. The warriors rallied behind him, their fear replaced by the resolve to stand with their leader. But Alaric knew the truth. This battle was far from over. Patsu's persistence meant that a far greater darkness was on the horizon, one that could not be defeated by sheer power alone. As the shadow of Patsu loomed over them, Alaric's mind raced. If the Bloodcrown were to survive what was to come, they would need more than strength. They would need unity, cunning, and the unbreakable will to face the darkness again. Let it come, he thought grimly. We are the Bloodcrown. We will endure. And so, as the ruins of the estate became the staging ground for another battle, Alaric stood tall, the weight of his family's legacy burning brighter than ever in his heart. The air crackled with tension as Alaric squared off against the spectral remnant of Patsu. The warriors around him formed a loose circle, their weapons drawn, but even they knew that this fight was beyond their power. The Bloodcrown's strength was now embodied in their leader, and they would either triumph or fall with him. Patsu's shadowy form twisted unnaturally, his eyes burning like twin stars of malevolence. You should feel honored, Alaric, he hissed. Few have pushed me to such limits. But you will come to regret your defiance. Alaric didn't respond immediately. His crimson aura flared, drawing the blood spilled on the battlefield into a swirling vortex around him. He could feel his body protesting. The strain of the crimson ascension had not yet subsided, and his reserves were dangerously low. But there was no time for weakness. Not now. I've heard enough of your boasting, Alaric finally said, his voice carrying the weight of his resolve. You're nothing more than a parasite clinging to existence. And parasites are meant to be crushed. Patsu let out a guttural laugh, the sound reverberating like the toll of a death bell. Then come, little king, he mocked, spreading his shadowy arms wide. Let us see if you can crush the void itself. The first clash was cataclysmic. Alaric launched himself forward, his blade forged from pure blood energy colliding with Patsu's claws. Sparks of crimson and black erupted in all directions, illuminating the ruins with a harsh, flickering light. Patsu retaliated with a sweeping strike, his shadowy limbs expanding and warping like living tendrils. Alaric dodged with precision, his movements fueled by years of training and the instincts of a warrior born. He countered with a series of rapid strikes, each one aimed to exploit the gaps in Patsu's shifting form. But Patsu was no ordinary opponent. His essence was fluid, unbound by the limitations of flesh and bone. Each time Alaric struck, the shadows would reform, his attacks seemingly absorbed into the void. You fight like a mortal, Patsu sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Did you really think that would be enough? Experience tales at Empire. Alaric knelt on the blood-soaked ground, his breath ragged, his body trembling from both pain and exhaustion. His right arm was gone, the stump wrapped hastily in torn cloth to stem the bleeding. His once pristine armor was shattered, barely clinging to his battered form, and his body bore countless wounds, each a reminder of the brutal battle against Patsu. It had been 3 days since the formless entity was defeated, but the price of victory weighed heavily on him. He turned his gaze to the field around him, and his expression darkened. The bodies of 5 Bloodcrown elders lay lifeless nearby, their once mighty forms reduced to hollow shells. Each of them had given their all to ensure Patsu's destruction, their sacrifices carved into the very earth. They had been pillars of strength, mentors and warriors without equal.
Now they were gone.
Damn it, Alaric growled, his voice low but seething with rage. He slammed his fist into the ground, bloodied fingers clawing at the dirt. Damn that bastard king. The words tore from his throat like a curse. He wasn't just blaming Patsu, though the monstrous entity had wrought unimaginable havoc. No, Alaric's anger was directed at someone far more insidious, the nameless figure who had unleashed Patsu on them in the first place, the shadowy hand that had orchestrated this disaster. The king in blood-crowned shadow. It was the title given to former king who dared to cover a blood-crown beauty. It was not given by Bloodcrown, but the supporters of other princes and princess who decided to mess with the king to made him abduct the throne. A stain that he would always carry for his failure. Alaric forced himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. His remaining warriors stood at a respectful distance, unsure whether to approach their lord in his grief. Their numbers had been decimated, and those who survived bore the same haunted look, faces marked by exhaustion and loss. A young soldier, barely more than a boy, hesitated before stepping forward. His voice was tentative, his hands trembling. "My lord, the others, they're asking for guidance. What do we do now?" Alaric turned his crimson eyes on the boy, and for a moment, the soldier flinched under the weight of his gaze. But then, Alaric's expression softened, his voice quiet but firm. "We rebuild," he said, though the words felt hollow. "We honor the fallen and prepare for what's to come." "But my lord," the soldier stammered, "how can we stand against another force like that? We've lost so many." Alaric's gaze shifted to the horizon, his jaw tightening. He could feel the faint remnants of Patsu's essence, scattered and weak, but not gone entirely. The battle had not just been against one enemy, it had been a test, a prelude to something far worse. "We'll find a way," Alaric said, though his voice betrayed a flicker of doubt. He glanced down at his missing arm, a grim reminder of his mortality. "The Bloodcrown has faced extinction before, and we survived. We will survive this too." Later that night, Alaric stood in the ruined halls of the Bloodcrown estate, alone. The once grand castle was a shell of its former self, its walls scarred by fire and shadow. The blood-red crown sigil above the throne flickered faintly, a symbol of their diminished power. He knelt before the throne, his hand resting on the cold stone. Memories of the fallen elders flooded his mind, their laughter, their wisdom, their unyielding loyalty. He clenched his jaw, his heart heavy with grief. "You gave everything," he murmured. "And I failed to protect you." A gust of wind blew through the shattered windows, carrying with it a faint, whispering voice. Alaric stiffened, his senses sharpening. "You didn't fail, Alaric," the voice said, low and echoing. "You survived. And survival is the first step to vengeance." Alaric rose to his feet, his crimson eyes scanning the room. The voice was unfamiliar, but its tone was not hostile. "Who's there?" he demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his blade, only to remember it lay broken in the aftermath of the battle. A figure stepped from the shadows, cloaked in darkness but bearing an aura of quiet power. The figure's face was obscured, but their voice was steady. "An ally," they said simply. "One who also seeks the end of the former king." Alaric narrowed his eyes, his instincts screaming caution. "And why should I trust you?" The figure chuckled softly. "You shouldn't. But trust this, the king is not invincible. And if you wish to destroy him, you will need allies. Strong ones." Alaric hesitated, his mind racing. The former king had sent Patsu as a weapon, a harbinger of his greater plans. If this mysterious figure spoke the truth, then the king's power extended far beyond what the Bloodcrown alone could handle. "Speak quickly," Alaric said. "What do you know of him?" The figure stepped closer, their voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Enough to know his weaknesses. Enough to know where to strike. But first, you must regain your strength, Alaric Bloodcrown. You cannot face him as you are." Alaric's hand clenched into a fist. He hated the truth of those words, but he couldn't deny them. He nodded slowly, his expression hardening. "Then tell me what needs to be done," he said. The figure smiled beneath their hood, a glint of satisfaction in their hidden eyes. "The first step," they said, "is reclaiming what was lost. The power of the ancients lies hidden, scattered across the land. And you, Alaric, are the only one who can wield it." A spark of determination ignited in Alaric's chest. The Bloodcrown would rise again, stronger than ever. And when the time came, he would face the former king, not as a broken lord, but as the unyielding force of vengeance his family's legacy demanded. "Lead the way," Alaric repeated, his tone resolute despite the doubt gnawing at the edges of his mind. The cloaked figure nodded and raised his hand, weaving a spell that manifested as an ethereal black tendril stretching into the horizon. The tendril pulsed faintly, its form like a thread of liquid shadow, beckoning Alaric forward. "Follow it," the figure said, his voice calm but laced with something Alaric couldn't quite place. "It will take you to your destination." Alaric hesitated for the briefest of moments before nodding. He had no reason to trust this stranger, but no other options lay before him. His right arm was gone, his forces shattered, and his enemies countless. If there was even the faintest hope of finding the power to protect his people and his legacy, he had to take it. As he began to follow the shadowy path, his thoughts churned like a storm. "I don't have any other choice but to believe him," Alaric thought grimly. "After battling Patsu, I know just how far we are from true strength. Patsu was ranked 30 among the king's commanders, and he nearly destroyed us. If there are over 30 others, stronger and more relentless, the Blood Crown might not survive their next attack." The weight of his losses bore down on him. The memory of the fallen elders haunted his steps, their sacrifices fresh wounds in his soul. The cloaked figure remained where he stood, watching Alaric disappear into the distance. Once the Blood Crown Lord was out of sight, the figure chuckled softly, a sound that grew into a malicious, echoing laugh. He, just as planned," the figure whispered, his voice dripping with triumph. "With this, the destruction of this world will be accelerated. And when the ashes settle, I will rise above them all. This world will be mine." He waved his hand, and the black tendril shimmered faintly, sealing Alaric's fate to a path he would soon regret. Unbeknownst to Alaric, the figure's true identity was far more sinister than he imagined. If the former king, the one who had once ruled over unimaginable power, had been present, he would have recognized the voice instantly. It was the same voice that had whispered to him in the void, promising overwhelming power in exchange for his loyalty. The voice that had transformed him into the king beyond shadows, an agent of destruction, enslaved to a force far older and more malevolent than himself. This was no ally. This was the puppeteer, the hidden force pulling the strings of chaos and destruction across the world. And now, Alaric was unknowingly walking straight into his web. The path before Alaric seemed endless, the shadow tendril weaving through ruined landscapes and ominous terrain. Though his body screamed for rest, he pushed forward, his resolve unshaken. "For the Blood Crown," he thought, clenching his remaining fist. "For my family." But as he walked, the faint sense of unease began to grow. The air grew heavier, colder, as if the very land was warning him of the danger ahead. Still he pressed on, unaware that with every step, he was moving closer to the jaws of a trap that could decide the fate of not just the Blood Crown, but the entire world. The tendril led Alaric through landscapes that seemed to grow darker with every step. The once lush plains near the Blood Crown estate had become desolate wastelands, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. Shadows loomed over the jagged rocks, and whispers, inaudible yet unnerving, began to creep into his thoughts. His hand reflexively hovered near the hilt of his backup blade, though he knew it would be of little use in his current state. He was weakened, wounded, even his vampiric trait not helping him against the wounds caused by dark energy. He could only stop them with his blood energy and not heal them, yet he is walking a path that he knew might be a trap. Yet his resolve remained firm. If this is what it takes to protect the Blood Crown, then so be it, he thought. After what felt like hours, the tendril stopped, spiraling downward into the earth. Before him stood an ancient archway carved into the side of a craggy mountain. The gateway pulsed faintly with dark energy, its surface etched with runes that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. "This is it," Alaric muttered, his voice heavy. The tendril vanished as he stepped closer to the archway, leaving him alone before its ominous presence. He hesitated for only a moment before crossing the threshold. Inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of dark magic surrounded him. The cavern was vast and jagged, with glowing red veins running through the walls like the lifeblood of the mountain. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it, a pulsing orb of crimson light. The light cast eerie shadows across the room, its energy calling to Alaric like a siren song. This power. Alaric's heart pounded as he approached. He could feel the immense energy radiating from the orb, unlike anything he had encountered before. It was raw, untamed, and alive. The closer he got, the louder the whispers became, this time forming coherent words. "Take it. With this, you can crush your enemies. Reclaim your glory." Alaric stopped before the pedestal, his hand hovering over the orb. The temptation was overwhelming. With this power, he could rebuild the Blood Crown, defend against the king beyond shadows, and strike down anyone who dared oppose them. But a voice inside him, a quiet yet resolute voice, urged caution. "This power feels wrong. Dangerous. But do I have another choice?" As he wrestled with his decision, The room seemed to pulse with anticipation. Then, suddenly, the cavern began to tremble. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a monstrous creature that appeared to be formed of both flesh and shadow. Its glowing eyes locked onto Alarin, and it roared with fury. The creature lunged forward, its massive claws slashing through the air. Alarin barely dodged, his instincts kicking in despite his injuries. He drew his blade, but his missing arm made his movements slower, less precise. The beast was relentless, forcing Alarin to retreat toward the pedestal. He realized with growing dread that he couldn't defeat this creature in his current state. His gaze flickered to the orb.
If I take it, I can fight. But at what cost?
Another strike from the beast sent him sprawling to the ground, his sword clattering away. The creature loomed over him, its claws raised for a killing blow. Alarin gritted his teeth. He didn't have time to weigh the consequences. With a roar of defiance, he reached out and grasped the orb. The moment his hand touched the orb, a surge of power unlike anything he had ever felt coursed through his body. His vision blurred, and his mind was flooded with images. Worlds burning, armies falling, and shadows devouring entire civilizations. The whispers grew deafening, their tone shifting from alluring to commanding. Submit to us, Alarin Bloodcrown.
Become our vessel. No.
Alarin growled, his voice echoing in the chamber. He fought against the invading presence, his will clashing with the ancient entity that resided within the orb. The power burned through him, searing his veins and forcing his body to change. His missing arm began to regenerate, though it wasn't flesh that formed, it was blood and shadow, merging into a twisted clawed appendage that pulsed with dark energy. The creature attacking him recoiled, its instincts recognizing the transformation. Alarin rose to his feet, the orb's power now flowing through him. His crimson eyes glowed with a new intensity, and his aura surged, shaking the cavern. The beast lunged again, but this time, Alarin was ready. With a swipe of his newly formed arm, he tore through the creature's shadowy flesh, reducing it to ash in a single strike. As the dust settled, Alarin stood in the silence of the cavern, his chest heaving. The orb's whispers had quieted, but he could feel its presence still lingering within him, a constant, gnawing force. He stared at his new arm, a mix of horror and fascination in his eyes. The power was incredible, but it came with a price. He could feel it tugging at his soul, threatening to consume him if he let his guard down. This is what it takes, he told himself, his resolve hardening. This is the power I need to protect my people. But as he left the cavern, the whispers returned, faint and mocking. You are ours now, Alarin. Unbeknownst to him, the power he had claimed was not only tied to the king beyond shadows but to the same sinister force that had manipulated the former king. The whispers within the orb had planted a seed, a fragment of their will, deep within Alarin's soul. Every moment he held this power, the lines between himself and the ancient entity blurred further, eroding his will and testing his resolve. The cycle of destruction was no longer a distant threat. It had been set in motion, its ripples already reaching across the realms. Alarin's decision to claim the orb had awakened forces beyond his comprehension, forces that fed on chaos and thrived in darkness. As he left the cavern, the blood-red moon above seemed to pulse in rhythm with his newfound power. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the world itself recoiled at his presence. He marched toward the ruins of his estate, his steps steady but his mind a battlefield. The remnants of the Bloodcrown estate were eerily quiet as Alarin approached. Survivors of the previous battle huddled in makeshift camps, their eyes widening as they saw him. Whispers spread among them, a mix of awe and fear at the sight of their lord's transformed arm. One of the surviving captains approached cautiously, bowing low. My lord, you've returned. But what is that? He gestured to Alarin's shadow blood arm, its dark energy crackling faintly. It's what was necessary, Alarin said, his tone sharp, dismissing the question. He swept his gaze over his battered people. Gather everyone. We begin rebuilding immediately. There is no time to waste. The captain hesitated, clearly uneasy, but nodded and hurried off to carry out the order. That night, Alarin stood alone in the ruins of the Great Hall. The weight of his choices pressed heavily on him. He clenched his clawed hand, staring at the way it pulsed with unnatural life.
This power, it's not mine. It's a curse.
The whispers were quiet now, lurking in the recesses of his mind, but he could still feel them. They prodded at his thoughts, tempting him with visions of victory and vengeance, promising strength beyond imagination. But along with those promises came flashes of something darker. Visions of himself losing control, becoming a vessel for the very force he sought to defy. Read new chapters at Empire.
What have I done?
Elsewhere, the cloaked figure who had guided him to the orb stood atop a jagged peak, watching the crimson horizon with a wicked grin. It begins, he murmured to himself, his voice filled with satisfaction. The blood crown is now my pawn, just as the king beyond shadows was before him. With Alaric caught in my web, this world will fall faster than the last. The figure raised a hand, and the shadows around him swirled, coalescing into a shape that resembled a throne. Sitting upon it, he surveyed the lands below as though they were already his. All the pieces are in place, he said, leaning back. And soon, Alaric's precious sanity will crumble. When it does, he will be nothing more than a tool, one that will bring about the end. As Alaric tried to find rest that night, sleep eluded him. When he finally closed his eyes, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. They spoke of power, of blood, of chaos, weaving their poison into his dreams. But amidst the chaos of his mind, a faint memory surfaced, a fragment of a long-forgotten lesson from one of the fallen elders. Power without control is no blessing, Alaric. It is a chain that binds your soul. The words struck like a dagger, cutting through the whispers for a fleeting moment. Alaric awoke in a cold sweat, his clawed hand pulsing with dark energy. For years, the world trembled under the shadow of two titanic forces locked in an endless, destructive war, Alaric Bloodcrown and the King Beyond Shadows. Their battles reshaped the earth, obliterating mountains, drying rivers and turning cities to ash. Kingdoms fell, alliances shattered, and the world's greatest champions perished in futile attempts to halt the escalating chaos. Alaric, consumed by the dark power of the orb, became a force of nature, a warlord whose every step left blood-soaked ground in his wake. The once noble lord of the Bloodcrown family, who had taken up the orb's power to protect his people, had been replaced by something monstrous. His armies, no longer human, were twisted amalgamations of blood and shadow, bound to his will. Victory after victory only dragged him deeper into madness, his obsession to destroy the King Beyond Shadows blinding him to the destruction he wrought. On the other side of the world, the King Beyond Shadows grew equally twisted. Empowered by an unseen master, his hunger for destruction was insatiable. Entire continents were swallowed by his darkness, his forces spreading like a plague across the lands. Every clash between Alaric and the king left devastation in its wake, their battles scarring the world beyond recognition. Desperate to stop the carnage, the remnants of vampires and other races formed the Concord of the Last Light. This coalition of scholars, warriors, and survivors scoured ancient ruins, searching for forgotten knowledge and artifacts to halt the two warlords. They amassed armies, forged alliances, and launched campaigns, but all efforts were futile. Alaric and the king were beyond the reach of mortal strength. The Concord's armies were crushed, their champions corrupted or slain, and their last hope extinguished as the coalition disbanded in despair. As the world crumbled, forces older than mortals turned their gaze toward the dying realm. These beings, neither benevolent nor malevolent, saw opportunity in the chaos, a chance to reshape existence itself. One such entity, known only as the Weaver, approached a small group of survivors. It whispered of salvation and a path to rebuild, though at a steep cost, submission to its will. Desperate and broken, they accepted, becoming the seeds of a new age. Meanwhile, Alaric and the king continued their relentless war. Over the years, they had become less like men and more like incarnations of destruction, their madness eclipsing their humanity. Their final clash came not by choice but inevitability, drawn together on the last intact continent, a place where the skies bled crimson, and the earth was jagged stone and molten rivers of shadow. The battle was unlike anything before, a storm of blood and darkness that ripped apart the very fabric of reality. The ground split open, and the sky wept ash. For days they fought, neither gaining the upper hand, their fury obliterating the remnants of the world around them. But as their strength waned, both Alaric and the king came to a terrible realization. They were pawns in a far greater game. The dark power that had fueled their rise had used them both, orchestrating the destruction of the world to reshape it in its image. The whispers that had driven Alaric into madness now revealed their true nature, a malevolent force that fed on chaos and destruction. In a fleeting moment of clarity, Alaric made a final, desperate decision. He turned his power inward, channeling the last vestiges of his will to strike at the orb's essence within him. The act unleashed a blinding explosion of blood and light that tore through the battlefield. The King Beyond Shadows, unprepared for the backlash, was consumed by the surge of energy, his form disintegrating into shadow and vanishing into nothingness. When the dust settled, the world was unrecognizable. Continents had been torn apart, oceans boiled away, and the air was thick with the echoes of their apocalyptic war. The few survivors who had hidden in the deepest caves and farthest reaches emerged to find a barren, silent wasteland. But even in this desolation, there was hope. From the ashes of the old world, the seeds planted by the Weaver began to sprout. Strange structures rose from the ground, and new forms of life, unlike anything seen before, began to take root. Alaric's name, and that of the King Beyond Shadows, passed into legend. Some remembered Alaric as a hero who sacrificed himself to end the war, while others cursed him as a destroyer who brought ruin to the world. Regardless of perspective, his story became a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and the price of power too great for any mortal to bear. As the survivors rebuilt, they could not forget the whispers of the past nor the shadow of what had been lost. A new age had begun, not one shaped by the wisdom of the old world, but by the echoes of its destruction and the mysteries of what lay ahead. Yet in the depths of this new creation, the faintest murmur could still be heard, as if the dark force that had orchestrated it all had not truly been defeated. It waited, patient and watchful, for the next cycle to begin. For what remained of the world, what was thought to be a new era of rebirth turned into a cruel revelation. 1,000 years after the fall of Alaric and the King Beyond Shadows, the truth emerged. The so-called Weaver of Salvation was a malevolent entity whose plan had always been to harvest the world's core. Alaric and the King were nothing more than tools, pawns crafted and unleashed to bring about the destruction necessary for the Weaver's ultimate goal. When the world core was harvested, the remnants of the once thriving planet were reduced from a living world to a barren realm. It became little more than a fragment of land adrift in the dark expanse of existence, a piece of property that could be claimed and bound by a master. The Weaver, triumphant, gifted the shattered world to his son as a spoil of conquest, leaving its denizens broken and enslaved. Catherine Bloodcrown, once a proud elder of her lineage, had already endured centuries of guilt. She had sealed herself away in the ruins of the Bloodcrown estate from the moment Alaric descended into madness, blaming herself for his fall and the ruin of their world. Her isolation was a penance, an endless vigil of regret. But her self-imposed imprisonment was shattered when the new ruler arrived, a cruel and depraved figure who claimed dominion over the dark existence realm. He ruled through fear and excess, coveting all the beauty of the world as his personal playthings. Catherine soon learned of his atrocities. The women of the once thriving world were now bound to his will, reduced to mere slaves by the dark magic imbued in the realm itself. But Catherine was no ordinary soul. As a scion of the Bloodcrown family and a child of the world, her very nature defied the binding laws of the realm. As long as she remained on the dark existence realm, or even a fragment of it, no force could enslave her. The new ruler, blind to this truth, made the mistake of trying to subjugate her, coveting her beauty like all the others. He learned the hard way. Catherine unleashed the full wrath of her bloodline, tearing through the ruler and his forces with brutal efficiency. His death was not quick or merciful, it was a statement. She spilled his blood across his halls, making it clear that even in a shattered world, the Bloodcrown's legacy was one of defiance. Your adventure continues at Empire. In the aftermath of his demise, Catherine assumed control of the realm, but only temporarily. She knew the Weaver would come for vengeance. The loss of his son was a wound that would not go unanswered. Understanding the futility of fighting an entity like the Weaver head-on, Catherine made a desperate choice. Gathering what power remained in the core of the realm, she enacted a forbidden ritual. She began to collapse the dark existence realm into the void, a place beyond all existence and outside the Weaver's reach. The cost was devastating. The inhabitants of the realm would die after 1,000 years of survival, doomed to extinction in the emptiness of the void. Yet Catherine believed this was the only path. If they were to perish, they would do so on their own terms, free from the humiliation and slavery imposed by the Weaver and his ilk. As the realm unraveled, Catherine stood at its heart, her resolve unshaken. She gazed into the void as the dark existence realm began to move into nothingness, a faint smile on her lips. For once in 1,000 years, she felt the burden of guilt and shame lift. She had ensured that neither she nor her people would ever be tools of another's will again. And as the last fragments of the realm fell into destined oblivion, she whispered to herself, "If this is the end, then let it be ours. Free." The Weaver, watching from the far reaches of existence, seethed in fury. His plans had been thwarted, his son avenged at a cost he had not foreseen. For the first time in eons, he felt something he had not known, loss. But for Catherine and the remnants of the dark existence realm, there was only silence. Silent, eternal freedom in the void as short as it may be. After a moment, Freya opened her eyes, gazing softly at Catherine. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, her gesture tender, though it caused Asher to roll his eyes at the perceived drama. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of this," Freya said sincerely, her voice filled with empathy. Catherine chuckled lightly, a sound both tired and resigned. "It's okay. After so many years spent in reflection, I've come to realize it wasn't my fault. The blame rests solely on the Crown Prince." Asher nodded in agreement. "Exactly. There's no need to punish yourself for the sins of others." He paused, his gaze shifting to Catherine, his tone sharpening. "However, you weren't completely blameless." Catherine raised an eyebrow at the statement, her expression calm but curious. "Oh?" And what, pray tell, was my sin? Asher's eyes narrowed, his words cutting like steel. Your sin was that you were weak. Freya stiffened at his bluntness, glancing nervously between them. Asher, she began, but he silenced her with a glance before continuing. And I don't intend to repeat that sin, he added coldly. That's why I'm here, to train and evolve, to grow stronger. Catherine studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, she nodded, a small wry smile curving her lips. You're right. Her voice softened, though the determination in her tone was unmistakable. I've come to the same conclusion. If I had been stronger, none of this would have happened. Asher's eyes flickered with approval at her response, a faint acknowledgement of her resolve. Freya, still uncomfortable with the exchange, said nothing, but a small spark of determination stirred in her own heart. Find adventures at Empire. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They each carried their own burdens, their own failures, and their own desires to rise above them. And while the past could not be undone, they knew the future could be shaped, if they were strong enough to seize it. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension, but Catherine broke it with a low, thoughtful chuckle. Strength, it's such a simple word, isn't it? She mused, leaning back against the worn throne she had claimed after so many years of isolation. I once thought I knew what it meant. Power to protect, to rule, to inspire fear in enemies. But I've learned that strength isn't just about what you can do. It's about what you can endure, and still rise from. Asher crossed his arms, his sharp eyes fixed on her. And yet endurance without action is nothing but complacency. Catherine nodded slowly, conceding his point. True. But if you mistake recklessness for strength, you risk losing everything, as I did. That's why I'll never stop you from seeking strength, Asher. But be careful not to let it consume you. I don't plan to lose myself, he replied firmly. And I won't repeat the mistakes of the past. Freya, who had remained quiet, finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. Strength isn't just about fighting battles. It's about having the wisdom to choose which battles are worth fighting. Both of you have seen what happens when power is used without balance. Catherine tilted her head, intrigued by Freya's perspective. You're wise for someone so young. Freya offered a faint smile. Watching the world fall apart teaches you a thing or two. The three of them stood there in the crumbling hall of the Bloodcrown estate, surrounded by shadows of the past. Each carried their own scars, their own regrets, but also a flicker of hope that the future could be different. So, Catherine said, standing from the throne with an air of finality. If we're to talk about strength, let's stop philosophizing and start acting. The Weaver's influence may be distant for now, but it will return. And when it does, we need to be ready. Asher replied coldly, if he comes I will kill him in a way he won't even be able to imagine. Both Catherine and Freya, as well as the spirit of the dark existence realm, manifested as a little girl, suddenly flinched at his cold words. They had heard Asher speak countless times, but this time his voice carried a bone-chilling coldness that made them shiver. The icy tone forced them to look at him with unease, wondering if he was still the same Asher they knew or if something darker had begun to surface. Let's go and explore this realm, he said to Catherine, his expression unreadable. Catherine hesitated for a moment before nodding, her gaze lingering on him. She wasn't sure if the shift in his demeanor was temporary or a sign of something far more ominous. Either way, she knew they had no choice but to press forward. It's like father, she thought grimly as she remembered her father after he came back becoming stronger. He used to act like Ty from time to time. She frowned but decided to observe him for some more time before taking any action. Catherine gestured toward the massive door at the far end of the hall. The Bloodcrown estate holds many secrets. If we're to prepare, we'll start here. There are weapons, artifacts, and knowledge hidden within these walls, remnants of our family's legacy. Together, we'll uncover them and decide how to wield them. Then, with a small shrug, she added, or we can explore the outside first if you'd prefer. The realm is vast, and there's more to discover beyond these walls. Freya hesitated, then raised a concern. And what about the void? You sent this realm spiraling into it to escape the Weaver. Will it hold? Catherine glanced at Asher before replying, not anymore, at least not as it did before. Now that Asher has become its master, he's acting as the realm core. As long as he grows stronger, so will this realm. If his power continues to rise, it might one day reach the level of a world again. Freya's eyes widened slightly at the revelation. So, even if it drifts in the void for millions of years. Nothing will happen to it, Catherine confirmed. As long as Asher lives, this realm will remain intact, stable, and safe. Suddenly the little girl, the spirit of the dark existence realm, looked up at Asher with wide, innocent eyes. Big brother will protect me, right? Asher glanced down at her and softened, patting her head with an unusual gentleness. Yes, I will. The girl smiled brightly and hugged him tightly. Though Catherine and Freya exchanged a glance, unsure of the shift in his demeanor, they said nothing. For now, they had work to do. Whatever shadows loomed over Asher's heart, they would confront them when the time came. For now, they had work to do. Whatever shadows loomed over Asher's heart, they would confront them when the time came. Is there anything nearby where we can train or fight creatures? Asher asked, his tone practical, his mind already focused on his next step.
Catherine nodded.
There's a place called the Dwell of the Damned. The Dwell of the Damned? Freya repeated, her voice tinged with unease. It's filled with dark creatures, Catherine explained, her expression hardening. The spawn of the Weaver. They are remnants of his corruption, the same entities that played a part in this world's destruction.
Asher frowned.
Why are they restricted to that place? If they're remnants of the Weaver, shouldn't they roam freely? It's all because of Tense, Catherine said, her gaze shifting meaningfully.
Tense.
Asher and Freya asked in unison, their confusion clear.
She's.
Catherine paused and then pointed toward the little girl still clinging tightly to Asher.
Her.
Both Asher and Freya froze, glancing down at the small girl. The spirit of the dark existence realm blinked innocently, her eyes wide with childlike purity.
Me.
Tense tilted her head, her voice soft and confused. Yes, you, Catherine confirmed. Even though you're the spirit of this realm, your presence exerts a force that binds the creatures of the Weaver. They can't spread or escape because of you. That's why the Dwell of the Damned exists as an isolated zone. Your influence keeps them locked there, unable to corrupt or destroy what remains of this realm. Asher narrowed his eyes, his gaze flicking between Catherine and Tense. So, she's more than just the spirit of this realm. She's its protector.
Catherine nodded.
Exactly. But her power is tied to the stability of this realm, and to you now as its master. If either of you falters, the creatures of the Dwell will spill out and destroy everything. Freya looked at Tense with newfound respect and concern. And yet she's just a child. She may look like a child, but her essence is far more ancient than we can imagine, Catherine said softly. Still, the Weaver's spawn are relentless. If we're going to train, the Dwell of the Damned is the perfect place to start. But be warned, those creatures are nothing like the battles you have faced before. Good, Asher said coldly, his expression hardening.
I don't need easy fights.
If we're going to prepare, we'll start there. Tense clung tighter to Asher, her small hands gripping his arm. Big brother will protect me, right? Asher looked down at her, his gaze softening briefly. He placed a reassuring hand on her head.
Yes, I will. Always.
Asher and the others followed Catherine, who now walked with renewed confidence. He had granted her the freedom to leave the confines of the Bloodcrown estate whenever she pleased, and she wasted no time in using her authority. With a simple wave of her hand, she transported them all to the Dwell of the Damned. The group found themselves standing before a structure that looked nothing like they had expected. This really does look like a well, Asher muttered, his sharp eyes studying the round brick-lined structure. The well emanated an ominous aura, an oppressive darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. Asher stepped closer and peered inside. What greeted him was a void of pitch-black darkness, seemingly endless. Black, clawed hands reached out from within, their movements erratic and desperate. The hands scratched and clawed at something invisible within the depths of the well, as though trying to tear through an unseen barrier. Yet, no matter how fiercely they struggled, they couldn't break free. Their claws left faint trails on the surface of the barrier, but it remained intact, mocking their futile efforts. It's like they're trying to escape, Freya said softly, her voice filled with unease as she stepped closer to the well, careful not to cross its threshold. They are, Catherine confirmed, her expression grim. Those hands belong to the spawn of the Weaver. They are trapped here, unable to break free, thanks to Tense influence. The little girl clung tightly to Asher's side, her wide eyes fixed on the well.
They're bad.
Really bad, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Asher placed a hand on her head, his expression softening for a moment.
Don't worry.
They won't hurt you. He turned back to Catherine. This barrier, can it be broken? Catherine hesitated before nodding. It can, but only by someone with power equal to or greater than the realm's core, or if Tense herself were to weaken. Freya's gaze flicked to the well, then to Tense. But why leave this place intact? Why not destroy them completely?
Catherine shook her head. Destroying them isn't that simple. These creatures are fragments of the Weaver's essence. Killing them here would only send their energy back to him, making him know our position. The well is a prison, not a battlefield. Asher's gaze lingered on the clawing hands. Prison or not, this is a good place to start. If we can fight them without breaking the barrier, we'll be able to train without making the Weaver stronger. Catherine nodded reluctantly. Yes, but you'll need to be careful. If you push too hard, you might weaken the barrier, and then. She trailed off, but the implications were clear. Continue reading at Empire. Asher stepped closer to the well, the black hands clawing wildly as if sensing his presence. His cold expression didn't waver. Good. Then let's see what these creatures are capable of. Catherine glanced at him, her concern evident. Don't underestimate them, Asher. The spawn of the Weaver may be trapped, but they are still lethal. Asher smirked faintly, his confidence unwavering. I wouldn't have it any other way. He extended his right hand toward the well, and a strange dark substance began to flow out of his palm. The liquid seemed alive, swirling and pulsing as it hovered just above his skin. It was a deep grayish-black color, almost like oil, but with a sinister, otherworldly quality. Freya instinctively jumped back, her eyes wide with alarm. Catherine, however, stood her ground, though her expression betrayed a flicker of concern. What is that? Freya asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and unease. It's ancient soul-corrupting essence, Asher replied, his tone calm but edged with a dangerous authority. It's a fusion of soul corruption oil and the essence of an ancient beast. This substance can obliterate souls entirely, destroying them so completely that even the Weaver won't be able to recover or sense their existence. Freya's breath caught in her throat. That's terrifying. And if there's any residual energy left behind, Asher continued, raising his left hand, I'll deal with that too. A swirling black vortex appeared in the palm of his left hand, its surface rippling like a living abyss. It radiated an aura so intense that even Catherine stiffened slightly. I'll absorb it with my assimilation ability, Asher explained, his voice steady but cold. I'll make the dark energy my own and strengthen myself in the process. Catherine studied him closely, her unease growing. Your power, she murmured. It's unlike anything I've seen before. Her tone was a mix of awe and caution as she added, if this were our old world, your abilities could easily rank as Alpha, one of the highest levels of power. Asher glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Alpha, he repeated, prompting her to explain. In our world, power is ranked based on tiers, Catherine elaborated. The highest rank is Alpha, reserved for leaders, monarchs or paragons of power. Beneath that are the other ranks, descending through tiers of strength and authority. Asher nodded thoughtfully. Interesting, he said. But your ranking system doesn't matter anymore. In this realm, strength is absolute, and rankings are irrelevant. Catherine couldn't argue with that. The world they once knew was gone, and in the void, survival was dictated by raw power. Turning his attention back to the well, Asher stepped closer, the dark hands clawing wildly in response to his presence. The sinister energy in the air seemed to thrum with anticipation. Let's see how much I can gain from this, he said, his voice laced with quiet determination as he prepared to unleash his terrifying abilities on the trapped creatures below. Asher walked calmly to the edge of the well, his gaze fixed on the writhing darkness below. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward and dove in, his body cutting through the air as though he were plunging into water. This fucking idiot! Freya shouted, her voice laced with panic. She instinctively extended her hand, a tendril of vines shooting out to try and catch him before he disappeared into the abyss. But before her tendrils could reach him, Catherine placed a firm hand on her shoulder, stopping her. Wait, Catherine said calmly, pointing toward the depths of the well. Freya followed her gesture and gasped. Asher's body was surrounded by a shimmering grayish-black aura that looked like liquid blood. The aura coiled and solidified around him, forming an arrow-shaped cocoon that seemed designed to pierce through the oppressive barrier at the well's depths. The tendrils of darkness within the well recoiled as if sensing the force of his descent. The arrow-shaped cocoon drove through the resistance effortlessly, cutting through the formless black like a spear through water. Freya's mouth opened in astonishment. What kind of power is that? Catherine's eyes narrowed as she watched. It's his ancient soul-corrupting essence, she said. It's not just a weapon, it's a shield, armor, and tool of absolute destruction. Even the Weaver's spawn fear it. Freya hesitated, still uneasy. But he just jumped in there like it was nothing. What if something goes wrong? Catherine gave a small shrug. How would I know it? You came with him.
Freya shrugged too, as she also haven't seen him using such abilities. She know of Magnus' family how their rumored black assimilation can assimilate things in their own blood ability and add extra effects to it, but it is only limited to little things not as powerful as soul corruption essence. She has hears of it. If isn't powerful poison found in some realm creatures, and only powerful ability users or high-level alchemy can solve this poison, but according to Asher it is even powerful than even
the soul corruption oil.
So, how can he assimilate such things? He murmured to herself, looking at Catherine, and then looked back at well. Freya looked down at the well again, watching as the last remnants of Asher's cocoon form disappeared into the darkness. The tendrils inside the well lashed out wildly, but none dared approach too closely to where Asher had entered. Big brother will be fine? Tense asked softly, her wide eyes fixed on the ominous darkness of the well, where the light seemed to vanish entirely. He will be, Freya replied with as much confidence as she could muster, though her voice betrayed a hint of worry. Catherine, standing beside her, shook her head subtly. She could sense Freya's hidden concern, but her own perspective was far different. Unlike Freya, Catherine didn't feel a shred of worry for Asher. She had already stretched her senses into the depths of the well and observed the carnage within. It was nothing short of a wolf entering a den of sheep, if the sheep were monstrous creatures born of darkness, and the wolf was a being like Asher. He's bored, Catherine muttered under her breath, earning a curious glance from Freya.
Bored?
Freya asked, puzzled. Catherine nodded, folding her arms as she kept her gaze on the well. The creatures down there, the ones we used to fear, the ones that brought my world to the brink of destruction, they're nothing to him. They can't even make him break a sweat. Freya's eyes widened. But they're supposed to be equal to his level, aren't they? They are, Catherine confirmed, her tone calm but edged with a hint of bitterness. But rank doesn't mean everything. In my world, it took 5 of our people to face a single creature of their own level. Even then, we weren't guaranteed victory. Asher, he's wiping them out as though they're beneath him. Catherine glanced down at Tense and smiled faintly.
He is
stronger than any of us imagined. Tense nodded, her wide eyes staring into the depths of the well. Suddenly, the darkness shifted, pulling apart as if it were alive. A shimmering screen formed over the surface, revealing Asher's fight within the abyss. Freya blinked in surprise, leaning closer to the strange screen. Catherine, however, simply looked at Tense with a knowing expression. She can't fully control her power yet, Catherine explained. But when she decides something with all her heart, it usually happens. Freya's eyes widened. So, she willed herself to see Asher's fight?
Catherine nodded.
Exactly. And now, thanks to her, we can all watch. With a casual snap of her fingers, Catherine conjured several ornate chairs from the shadows. Why don't you tell me more about yourself while we watch? She suggested, taking a seat and gesturing for Freya to join her. Freya hesitated but eventually sat down, her eyes flicking between the screen and Catherine. You want to know about me? Catherine smiled, resting her chin on her hand. Yes. We will be traveling together from now on, but I know little about who you are. Where you're from, your powers, your goals. Humor me. Freya exhaled deeply, folding her hands in her lap. There's not much to tell, honestly. I come from a small world that was destroyed long ago. My powers, they're connected to nature, growth, and life. But in the void, those powers are limited. I'm here because I want to survive, and maybe. She trailed off, her gaze softening as she glanced at the screen. Maybe I want to help rebuild something. A place where life can thrive again. No wonder I felt you are different from Asher, Catherine said. I was adopted when I was little. Apparently I was found inside a seed, inside a dying tree. The one who saved me gave me their surnames as my ability was somewhat similar to theirs.
How so? She asked.
My real ability name is called Amber Heart World Tree. Aside from life, it also have Flame of Life, like in Phoenix Flames, which destroys as well as restores, she said. My goal is one day to rebuild the realm where I was found, or maybe at least find out what happened there, she said, sighing. Catherine tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. That's a noble goal. I wouldn't have guessed you'd want something so hopeful, considering where we are. Freya smirked faintly. Hope is all we have left, isn't it?
Catherine chuckled. Perhaps.
But hope without strength is just a fleeting dream. And you're stronger than you think. Freya looked at Catherine, startled by the sincerity in her voice. Before she could respond, the screen flared brightly, drawing their attention. On the display, Asher was cutting through the abyssal creatures with ruthless efficiency. His movements were precise, his attacks devastating. The dark energy surrounding him pulsed with a life of its own, almost as if it were feeding on the destruction he wrought.
Freya shuddered.
It's hard to believe he's human. Catherine leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the screen displaying Asher's relentless assault. He's more than human now. And that's exactly why we need to understand him, and ourselves. If we're going to survive, we'll need more than hope and power. We'll need each other. As the massive door opened, Freya stepped inside and was immediately struck by the sight before her. She had expected relics, grand statues, or perhaps ethereal manifestations of power. Instead, what greeted her were rows upon rows of beautifully crafted coffins, each adorned with intricate carvings and glowing with faint traces of energy. These, Catherine began, her voice calm and almost reverent, are the sleeping ancestors of my family. We are immortal, Freya, but not invincible. When one of us grows weary of existence or chooses to step away, we enter eternal sleep. The only thing that can truly end us is if our legacy is claimed, or as we call it, the passing blood crown, a final and true death. Freya moved closer, her gaze sweeping over the countless coffins. There are so many, she murmured, awe creeping into her voice. By her count, there had to be over 500 of them. Catherine gave a slight shrug. We were born kings. Our bloodline traces back to the progenitor himself. Every vampire in our lineage was destined for greatness, born to lead. That is why our ability is called Blood Crown. It embodies the very essence of rulership and dominance. Freya raised an eyebrow. Then why are you no longer a royal family? Catherine's expression hardened slightly. During the reign of the 2124th king, there was an internal strife that decimated our family. The siblings of that generation turned on one another in a bloody struggle for the throne. The king, after murdering his own brothers and sisters, abolished our royal status to prevent such bloodshed from ever happening again. We were reduced to a duke family, a decision that most of us accepted. It kept the bloodline intact and spared us from further tragedies. Freya nodded, her expression somber. That must have been difficult. Catherine shrugged again, a faint smirk on her lips. We adapted. Titles mean little when strength is all that matters. We remain the strongest, whether royalty or not. Freya turned her attention back to the coffins. So, how do I prove myself? How do I claim one of their legacies? Catherine gestured toward the rows of coffins. Each of these ancestors achieved something extraordinary in their lifetime. Their legacies remain here, waiting for someone worthy to claim them. She pointed to a coffin crafted from a mix of wood and gold, its surface glowing faintly. That one belonged to Aurilo's blood crown. She reached the pinnacle of alchemy, creating miracles with her art. Catherine then motioned to another coffin, this one adorned with sword-like carvings and exuding a sharp, oppressive aura. And this one? He was a swordmaster so powerful that his gaze alone could cleave mountains. Freya's eyes widened. And I just touched them? Catherine nodded, pointing to the farthest coffin in the chamber. It was set on a raised pedestal, grander than all the others, and surrounded by an intricate blend of crimson and gold energy. You will start with that one, the progenitor himself. Each ancestor will test you in their own way. If you're compatible with their legacy, they will grant it to you. If not, you move on to the next. Freya swallowed hard, her eyes locked on the progenitor's coffin. Its presence was overwhelming, as if the room itself revolved around it. And if none of them choose me? Catherine smirked faintly. Then you walk out of here empty-handed. But I doubt that will happen. You have potential, Freya. Even the ancestors might see it. Freya took a deep breath, steeling herself as she stepped forward. 512 legacies, she muttered under her breath. I just need one. Her steps echoed through the vast chamber as she approached the progenitor's coffin. The air around it was heavy, thick with ancient power that seemed to press down on her. Freya reached out hesitantly, her fingers trembling as they neared the surface. Good luck, Catherine said from behind, her voice almost teasing. You'll need it. Freya nodded silently, her focus entirely on the coffin before her. This is it, she thought, touching the progenitor's coffin. The moment her fingers made contact, the world around her shifted, and a surge of energy revolved around her, but then after a moment it subsided. Freya withdrew her hand from the progenitor's coffin, her heart sinking slightly as the ancient energy dissipated. She had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the strongest legacy would resonate with her. But the coffin remained silent, its aura indifferent to her presence. Catherine's voice broke the silence, calm but matter-of-fact. It seems the progenitor's legacy is not for you. Don't take it personally, his standards are impossibly high. Freya nodded, though disappointment lingered in her gaze. She glanced back at the grand coffin one last time before turning toward the next in line. It's fine, she muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. There are plenty of others. As she approached the next coffin, she noticed its design was far less grandiose than the progenitor's. This one was crafted from a blend of deep crimson wood and faintly glowing silver. Carvings of vines and blossoms adorned its surface, radiating an aura of life and regrowth. A soft warmth emanated from it, as though it were inviting her to step closer. Stay tuned with Empire. Catherine observed from a distance, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. That one belonged to Sorelia Bloodcrown, she said. She was a healer and a guardian of life, an ancestor whose legacy might complement your own abilities. Freya reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against the intricate carvings. This time, the reaction was immediate. A soft green light spread from the coffin, enveloping her in a gentle pulsating glow. The warmth felt familiar, almost comforting, and for a moment, Freya thought she had been accepted. But then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded. The coffin grew still once more, its energy retreating back into its depths. Freya sighed, frustration beginning to creep into her voice. Not this one either. Catherine shrugged. Patience. The legacies choose based on compatibility. You're not being rejected, you're simply not the right match for those powers. Gritting her teeth, Freya moved on to the next coffin. This one was sleek and metallic, its surface engraved with symbols of fire and ash. The energy it radiated was fierce and untamed, a stark contrast to the serene aura of Sorelia's. Ah, Alarin Bloodcrown, Catherine said, a glimmer of interest in her tone. A master of destructive flames. He was said to embody the concept of rebirth through destruction. If fire truly runs in your veins, Freya, this one might recognize you. Freya's heart quickened as she placed her hand on the coffin. Flames erupted instantly, swirling around her in a chaotic dance of heat and light. For a moment, she felt the flames resonate with her own power, the sensation exhilarating and almost overwhelming. But then the flames receded, leaving her standing alone once more. The coffin returned to its dormant state. Freya clenched her fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. How many do I have to try before one of them accepts me? Catherine chuckled lightly. Sometimes it takes one. Sometimes it takes 100. There's no way to predict it. All you can do is keep moving forward. With a determined nod, Freya moved to the next coffin, refusing to let disappointment consume her. With it she has tested over 100 coffin, but none of them accepted her. Frustrated but not defeated, she moved to next coffin. The next coffin she approached was distinctly different from the others. It was smaller, less ornate, but emanated a strange pulsating rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. The material seemed to shift between liquid and solid, as though the coffin itself was alive. Freya hesitated, her hand hovering over it. What about this one? She asked, glancing back at Catherine. Catherine's eyes narrowed, her tone uncharacteristically serious. That one belonged to Alarin Bloodcrown. He was peculiar. A visionary and a recluse. His legacy was rumored to blur the lines between life and death. Not many dared to approach his coffin. Freya swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of fear and intrigue. What's the worst that could happen? Catherine smirked, her seriousness melting away. You die. For real this time. Freya shot her a glare, but Catherine's teasing grin offered little reassurance. Still, Freya steeled herself, pressing her palm firmly against the shifting surface of Alarin's coffin. The reaction was instant. A cold, almost chilling energy surged through her, freezing her in place. The rhythmic pulse grew louder, resonating through her chest and syncing with her heartbeat. The room around her blurred, and she felt herself being pulled into a void of swirling shadows and faint whispers. Freya's vision cleared, and she found herself standing in an endless expanse of mist. A figure materialized before her. A tall, gaunt man draped in robes that seemed to shimmer like oil under moonlight. His face was pale, his eyes two pools of swirling black. You, he said, his voice a soft yet piercing echo. You are not what I expected. Freya's breath caught in her throat. Are you Alarin? The figure inclined his head slightly. I am what remains of him. You seek my legacy. Freya straightened her posture, meeting his gaze. I do. The figure inclined his head slightly. I am what remains of him. You seek my legacy. Freya straightened her posture, meeting his gaze. I do. Alarin circled her slowly, his presence unnerving but strangely compelling. You carry life within you. Flames that destroy and restore. Yet you stand before me, seeking the power of death. He paused, his head tilting as though considering her. Why? Freya hesitated, then spoke with conviction. Because I want to protect the people I care about. Life and death are two sides of the same coin, aren't they? If I can wield both, I can make sure the ones I love survive. Alarin stopped, his expression unreadable.
A noble sentiment. But power comes with cost.
Are you prepared to pay it? Freya clenched her fists. If it means I can stand beside him, if it means I can be strong enough to help him, then yes, I'll pay it.
Huh? Stand by him?
Well, whatever, who am I to ask love brain kids, he said, tilting his head. Alarin's lips curled into a faint smile, his dark eyes glinting.
Very well. But be warned, child.
My legacy is not a gift, it is a burden. The power of death is a heavy chain to bear. If you falter, it will consume you. Before Freya could respond, Alarin raised a hand, and the mist around them swirled violently. Darkness surged toward her, engulfing her in a torrent of cold energy. She gasped, feeling as though her very essence was being unraveled and reshaped. When the darkness receded, Freya found herself back in the chamber, her knees buckling as she collapsed to the floor. Her chest heaved as she struggled to catch her breath. Catherine was at her side in an instant, her sharp eyes scanning Freya for signs of harm.
Well?
Catherine asked, her voice calm but expectant. Freya lifted her hand, and a faint black aura danced around her fingertips, cold and weightless. She looked up at Catherine, her eyes now flecked with dark, swirling shadows. I think he accepted me, Freya said, her voice tinged with exhaustion and awe. Catherine's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Congratulations. You're the first in centuries to inherit Alarin's legacy. Freya staggered to her feet, the weight of her new power settling over her like an invisible mantle. Despite her exhaustion, a spark of determination lit her eyes. This is only the beginning, she said, her voice steady. I'll make this power my own. You should, Catherine said, her tone stern, or this legacy will return. These legacies won't remain in the hands of the unworthy. You have only 10 years to master its power. Freya nodded, a sense of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders.
I understand. Good.
Let's go back, Catherine said, snapping her fingers. In an instant, the chamber around them dissolved, and they reappeared at the well where the trial had started. The moment they arrived, Catherine's gaze shifted, and a faint smile played on her lips. Oh, it seems he's finally found a worthy opponent. Freya followed Catherine's gaze to the battlefield beyond the well, where Asher was locked in combat against a humanoid creature with octopus-like features. The being moved with unnatural fluidity, its tendrils lashing out like whips as Asher dodged and countered with precision. Freya's eyes narrowed as she analyzed the fight. His opponent is at the platinum grade, isn't it? Seems like an elite of that level. Experience tales with Empire.
Catherine nodded.
Yes, it's impressive. At silver rank, Asher can still fight evenly with a platinum tier opponent. That's not something you see often. Freya watched closely, her eyes catching the faint, erratic flicker of energy surrounding Asher. Though it looks like he just broke through recently, she remarked, noting the unstable aura emanating from him. Catherine folded her arms, a thoughtful look crossing her face. True. His energy hasn't stabilized yet, which is risky in a battle like this. But it's also an opportunity. This kind of pressure might help him solidify his breakthrough. Freya's fingers itched with her newly acquired power, the faint shadowy aura flickering around her hands. Watching Asher fight so fiercely lit a fire within her. She wanted to stand by his side, to be strong enough to face the challenges ahead without hesitation. An hour ago, the moment Asher pierced the barrier and entered the dwelling of ashes, all the dark creatures within lunged at him like ravenous lions sensing fresh prey. Asher landed gracefully on the field, his calm demeanor unshaken. Muttering under his breath, "Hedge spikes," he summoned a field of jagged grayish bloody spikes that erupted from the ground, skewering the charging creatures and killing them instantly. As the battlefield momentarily quieted, Asher raised his left hand, summoning a gleaming sword. In his right hand, a massive scythe materialized, its blade exuding a dark, ominous aura. Without hesitation, he moved into action, his attacks precise and devastating. Asher mused, observing the remains of his enemies as they dissolved into ash. The poison is more effective than I thought. Unrelenting, Asher advanced deeper into the dwelling. Within just 10 minutes, he had slain over 100 of the dark creatures, each one falling to his seamless blend of swordsmanship and scythe strikes. The air around him grew heavier, saturated with the oppressive aura of the dwelling, but it didn't deter him. His assimilation ability kicked in, as he devoured their remains and made them his own power. Asher's assimilation ability worked seamlessly, absorbing the remains of the fallen creatures into his body. The swirling energy they left behind, dark and heavy, flowed into him like rivers converging into an ocean. His aura grew darker, more refined, as the power he absorbed melded with his own. Every essence he devoured made him faster, stronger, and more attuned to the oppressive environment of the dwelling. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the abyss around him. The faint traces of fear and hesitation from earlier battles were gone, replaced by a sharp determination. Each step forward resonated with authority, as if he were claiming dominion over the hostile realm. The creatures grew stronger as he delved deeper, their forms more grotesque and their movements more coordinated. One particularly massive beast emerged from the shadows, a hulking amalgamation of limbs, teeth, and glowing red eyes. It roared, shaking the ground as it lunged toward Asher. He smiled, gripping his scythe tightly. "Let's see if you are a challenge or not." The creature swung a massive claw, aiming to crush him in one blow. Asher sidestepped effortlessly, countering with a sweeping strike of his scythe that tore through the beast's torso. Black ichor sprayed across the battlefield, sizzling as it hit the ground. The beast roared in pain, thrashing wildly. With a flick of his wrist, Asher summoned a chain of crimson energy, ensnaring the creature's limbs. "You're strong," he muttered, "but you are slow too." He pulled the chain taut, forcing the creature to its knees before plunging his sword into its core. The beast let out a final guttural cry before collapsing into a pile of ash. Asher's assimilation activated once more, devouring the beast's potent essence. A surge of power coursed through his veins, causing his aura to flare brighter than before. He clenched his fists, feeling the raw strength flowing within him. "Is this all they have?" he muttered, his voice laced with disdain. He looked around at the path from which the massive beasts had come and decided to enter it. "I'm close to a breakthrough. Absorbing some more will allow me to achieve it," he mumbled to himself as he continued walking. Soon, he found himself in what seemed like a coliseum. Is this where the dwelling is actually located?" he thought as he stepped out of the lobby area. Asher stepped into the massive coliseum, his eyes scanning the imposing structure. It was unlike anything he had encountered so far, its ancient design exuding both grandeur and foreboding. The air was thick with an unnatural energy, and his instincts told him this was the heart of the dwelling. At the center of the arena, a grotesque and bloated creature lounged on a massive throne. Its form was vaguely humanoid, with rolls of flesh spilling over its oversized frame. The creature's bat-like features were grotesquely exaggerated: huge wings folded against its back, fanged teeth jutting from its oversized mouth, and crimson eyes that gleamed with malevolent intelligence. A platinum rank bat, and it's on a throne? Looks like it's more than just an elite, probably a lord rank among platinum. Asher muttered, gripping his scythe tighter. The beasts are also divided as in ability ranks, like for a platinum realm beats it could be of common, elite, lord, king, emperor, pseudo-divine or saint and finally divine rank beast. Before he could make a move toward the creature, he caught sight of the massive gate on the other side of the Colosseum. From the shadows emerged countless dark creatures, their numbers seemingly endless. They were varied in size and shape, some humanoid, others grotesque amalgamations of limbs and teeth, but all of them shared the same menacing aura. Asher's eyes flicked between the bat-like creature and the growing horde of dark beasts. His mind raced as he analyzed the situation. If I rush the throne now, these smaller ones will just flank me. First, I reduce their numbers. Asher cracked his neck, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The horde of dark creatures swarmed toward him, their feral cries reverberating through the Colosseum like a chaotic symphony. He shifted his stance, gripping his scythe with one hand and his sword with the other.
"Come on then," he muttered.
"Let's see what you've got." The first wave of creatures lunged at him, their claws gleaming like jagged obsidian. Asher's movements were fluid, a deadly dance of precision and power. His scythe arced through the air, severing limbs and torsos with each swing. The creatures fell like leaves in a storm, their ash-like remains scattering across the arena. But they kept coming. A hulking beast, twice the size of the others, charged forward, its fanged maw gaping wide. Asher sidestepped just in time, driving his sword upward into the creature's throat. Black ichor sprayed from the wound as the beast let out a guttural roar, collapsing in a heap. "They're relentless," he muttered, his breath steady despite the onslaught. The pressure was mounting. With every beast he felled, more seemed to emerge from the shadows, their numbers unyielding. Asher gritted his teeth, his aura flaring as he unleashed a devastating wave of energy from his scythe. The wave tore through the advancing creatures, reducing dozens to nothing more than smoldering piles of ash. In the midst of the chaos, Asher felt a shift within himself. His assimilation ability was working overtime, absorbing the essence of the fallen beasts. The energy flowed into him, building and intensifying, threatening to overwhelm him. His body trembled as the power surged, pushing him to his limits. A roar of defiance escaped his lips as he planted his feet firmly on the ground. The essence within him reached a crescendo, and suddenly, the barrier holding him back shattered. A surge of silver light erupted from Asher, enveloping him in a brilliant glow. The creatures nearest to him were blasted backward, their forms disintegrating in the wake of his breakthrough. His aura stabilized, growing sharper and more refined. He had broken through to silver rank, and the power coursing through his veins was undeniable. "So this is what it feels like," Asher murmured, flexing his fingers. He could feel the difference immediately. His movements were quicker, his attacks sharper, and his energy reserves vastly expanded. The horde showed no signs of slowing, but Asher was ready. With newfound strength, he launched himself into the fray. His scythe moved like an extension of his arm, slicing through the air with deadly precision. He leaped into the midst of a cluster of beasts, spinning in a whirlwind of destruction. Black ichor splattered across the ground as his enemies fell one by one. A smaller, more agile creature tried to flank him, its claws aiming for his back. Asher anticipated the move, twisting mid-air and driving his sword through its chest. The creature let out a strangled cry before collapsing, its body dissolving into ash. "Still not enough," Asher said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The tide of battle shifted as more powerful creatures emerged from the shadows. These new adversaries were larger, faster, and exuded an aura of menace that far surpassed the earlier waves. Asher tightened his grip on his weapons, his silver aura flaring brighter. "Let's see if you can keep up," he challenged, his voice tinged with confidence. The battle raged on, the arena echoing with the clash of steel and the cries of dying beasts. Asher fought with unrelenting ferocity, his movements a blur as he pushed himself to the limits of his newfound power. Despite the overwhelming odds, he refused to falter. Each swing of his scythe and thrust of his sword was precise, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The dark creatures, no matter how strong or numerous, could not match his sheer will and determination. Find adventures at Empire. The Colosseum floor was littered with the remains of the fallen, and Asher stood amidst the carnage, his silver aura flickering like a beacon of defiance. He could feel the eyes of the bloated platinum rank beast on the throne watching him, its crimson gaze burning with malice and anticipation. "I'll deal with you soon," Asher muttered, his gaze locking onto the creature. "But first, I'll finish clearing your minions." With a surge of energy, Asher charged back into the fray, his relentless assault carving a path through the seemingly endless horde. Every swing of his scythe, every thrust of his sword, brought him closer to the throne, and the true test that awaited him there. The bat creature on the throne lifted one bloated finger, pointing at Asher with a menacing gleam in its crimson eyes. In response, a platinum elite-ranked creature emerged from the shadows. It had a humanoid form but distinctly octopus-like features, its head a mass of writhing tentacles, each tipped with a sharp, glistening barb. The creature lunged at Asher with terrifying speed, its tentacles extending like whip-like projectiles from every angle. Asher twisted his body, dodging 3 of the deadly appendages, but the remaining 5 grazed him. A searing pain erupted across his torso as the black ink-like venom laced in the tentacles sizzled against his skin, melting flesh and sending waves of agony coursing through his body. "Fuck!" Asher cursed, his voice a mix of frustration and pain. He leaped backward, narrowly evading another barrage of tentacles. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as he assessed his wounds. The venom worked fast, and even with his enhanced vitality, it was a race against time to counteract its effects. Gritting his teeth, Asher extended his hands. His shadowy aura flared brightly as he activated Shadowgrave, one of his abilities that allowed him to summon entities he'd created in the past and save them here. 3 humanoid blood golems materialized beside him, their forms twisted and reinforced with the same corrosive essence he'd absorbed from earlier battles. "Keep it busy," Asher commanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. The golems lunged at the octopus-like creature, their shields glowing faintly with regenerative energy as they intercepted its tentacles. The monster screeched in frustration as the golems, faster and more agile than their lumbering forms suggested, coordinated their attacks. They formed a defensive perimeter, striking back with acidic claws that melted through the creature's outer hide. With the golems holding the platinum elite at bay, Asher pressed his palm against his chest, channeling energy to heal his wounds. The venom resisted, its corrosive nature eating away at his energy reserves, but Asher's will was unyielding. His aura flared once more, and the venom's effect began to slow. "Now I can focus on you," he muttered, his tone cold as he directed the golem to now focus on minions as they are still left. The golems left the octopus creature as they joined the third one battling with the minions on its own. The octopus-headed creature let out an ear-piercing screech, its glowing eyes narrowing with intelligence and malice. It flicked its tentacles, breaking through one golem's defenses and shattering it into a pool of dissolved blood. Asher's eyes tracked its movements as the creature extended its fingers, which transformed into dozens of tentacle-like missiles that launched toward him in a deadly salvo. Not this time, Asher growled, slamming the butt of his scythe into the ground. A wave of blood erupted around him, forming a barrier that absorbed the incoming tentacle missiles. The force of the attack sent shockwaves across the arena, but the barrier held firm. Seizing the moment, Asher retaliated. His scythe shimmered with dark energy as he dashed forward, closing the distance between him and the creature in a blink. With a swift, calculated strike, he severed two of its main tentacles. Black ichor sprayed from the wounds, the creature recoiling in pain and fury. But it wasn't over. The monster's severed tentacles regenerated almost instantly, their ends forming sharp, spear-like points. It attacked again, its speed and ferocity increasing as if feeding off its own pain. Asher dodged and countered, each movement a blend of precision and instinct. He summoned the remaining golems to flank the creature, their corrosive claws tearing into its limbs while Asher targeted its core. The creature fought back with relentless aggression, but the combined assault of Asher and his summoned allies began to wear it down. "You're tough," Asher admitted, his breath heavy. "But you will die today." With a burst of speed, he leaped above the creature, his scythe raised high. Dark energy coiled around the blade as he brought it down with all his strength, aiming for the creature's head. The impact was devastating, splitting the creature's skull and sending it crashing to the ground. Asher landed gracefully, his scythe still crackling with residual energy. The creature writhed for a moment before its body dissolved into ash, its essence absorbed into Asher's being. As the battlefield fell silent, Asher stood amidst the carnage, his aura flickering but steady. He glanced toward the throne, where the bloated bat creature watched him with a predatory grin. "You're next," Asher said, his voice low and dangerous. He glanced back at the bloated bat creature on the throne. "You've sent your pawn," he said, his voice cold and resolute. "Now it's your turn." The bat creature let out a low, rumbling laugh, its massive form shifting on the throne. The battle was far from over. Suddenly, the creature stood, its towering frame radiating an oppressive aura. Before Asher could react, it vanished from its spot. "What the?" Asher began, but he was abruptly silenced as the creature reappeared right in front of him. Its massive fist slammed into his midsection, sending shockwaves through his body. Blood sprayed from Asher's mouth as he doubled over in pain. "Cook. Impossible." Asher gasped, struggling to stay on his feet. He glared at the creature, his sharp gaze narrowing as he saw his illusionary crown above its head floating subtly. His eyes widened in shock. "Why you? You're at least king grade," he stammered, the realization hitting him like another punch. The bat creature grinned wickedly, its jagged teeth glinting in the dim light of the Colosseum. Without a word, it opened its massive mouth, aiming to devour Asher in one savage bite. Asher's instinct screamed at him to move. The creature's massive hand shot toward him like a machine's unyielding grip, clasping around him with terrifying force. But just as its jaws snapped shut, Asher activated his transmutation ability, transforming his body into blood and slipping through the creature's grasp. In the stands, Catherine observed the battle from the shadows, her sharp eyes narrowing as she saw Asher evade the creature's attack. "So, he still has some fight in him," she thought, her fingers twitching as she debated intervening. However, her gaze lingered on the bat-like monstrosity, and her expression darkened. "It's not something he can handle alone," she muttered. Just as she raised her hand, preparing to step in and save him, Asher managed to stabilize himself. "He's more resourceful than I thought," Catherine noted, retreating her hand. "Let's see how far he can go." The bat creature's deep, mocking laugh echoed through the arena as it turned its predatory gaze back to Asher. He, human," it growled, its voice guttural and mocking. "Since when did humans grow so bold as to venture here?" Asher wiped the blood from his mouth, his sharp eyes never leaving the creature. The corrosive dark energy from the earlier attack lingered on his body, burning his skin even as his natural regeneration worked tirelessly to heal him. "You can speak?" Asher asked, his tone cautious but steady as he controlled his breathing. The bat creature's grin widened, its massive form radiating raw power. "Speak? Of course I can. I am no mere beast. You think you stand a chance against me, human? Your struggle is amusing." Asher's fingers tightened around his scythe, his mind racing as he prepared for the next exchange. This wasn't just a battle, it was survival against a foe far stronger than anything he had faced before. "Good. Entertain me," the creature said suddenly, snapping its fingers. Its throne reappeared behind it, and it sat down with a resounding thud. With another snap of its fingers, 3 octopus-headed creatures materialized, their grotesque forms lunging at Asher. "Amuse me, human," the creature said, lounging on the throne with one hand resting lazily against its face, watching Asher like a bored spectator. Asher gritted his teeth, his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. This creature was mocking him, treating him like a toy. But instead of letting the insult cloud his judgment, Asher calmed himself, calculating his next move. If he can summon 30, maybe 35 more of these creatures, I might advance to gold rank. Then I'd stand a chance against him. But will he even summon that many? Asher thought, quickly analyzing the situation. His hand released the hilt of his sword, shifting to grip his scythe tightly. First, I'll deal with these 3, he muttered to himself, his resolve hardening. The octopus-headed creatures screeched, their tentacles lashing out in coordinated strikes. Asher leaped back, evading a series of attacks. His scythe flashed through the air, slicing cleanly through the appendages of one creature. Black ichor sprayed from the wounds as it shrieked in agony. But the remaining 2 creatures were relentless, their tentacles darting toward Asher with unnerving precision. Despite his agility, some managed to graze him, their acidic touch burning through his flesh. Pain surged through his body, causing him to momentarily wince. Ugh, damn it, Asher hissed under his breath. He clenched his scythe tighter, using the pain to sharpen his focus. The creatures were fast, but their movements were predictable. He just needed to outmaneuver them. With a burst of speed, Asher ducked under a flurry of tentacles and swept his scythe in a wide arc, cleaving through the legs of one creature and decapitating another. The remaining creature hissed and lunged at him in desperation, but Asher spun gracefully, driving his scythe through its core. As the last of the 3 creatures dissolved into black ash, Asher stood amidst the carnage, his breathing steady but his body aching from the wounds he had taken. He glanced at the bat-like figure on the throne, who clapped slowly, a mocking grin on its face. Enjoy new tales from my virtual library empire. Not bad, human, it said, its voice dripping with amusement. But that was just a warm-up. Let's see how long you can keep this up. The creature snapped its fingers again, and 5 more octopus-headed creatures appeared, each larger and more menacing than the last. Asher braced himself, his scythe glowing faintly as he prepared for another wave. This is going to hurt, he muttered, steeling his resolve as the next battle began. As the 5 new creatures lunged toward Asher, their tentacles flailing with increased speed and ferocity, he tightened his grip on the scythe. Each of their movements seemed more calculated, more precise than the previous wave, forcing him to stay constantly on the move. Leaping to the side, Asher narrowly avoided a barrage of tentacles that struck the ground with enough force to crack the stone beneath him. He retaliated with a sweeping strike, his scythe's dark aura slicing through 2 of the creature's appendages. They screeched, recoiling momentarily, but the others closed the gap quickly. One of the creatures surged forward, wrapping its tentacles around Asher's arm. The acidic touch burned through his clothing and skin, and he gritted his teeth against the searing pain. With a sharp twist, he wrenched himself free, severing the tentacle with a quick slash of his scythe. You're tougher than the last group, Asher muttered, blood dripping from his wounds. His vision blurred momentarily, the pain threatening to overwhelm him. But he couldn't afford to falter now. Drawing on the energy he had absorbed earlier, Asher activated his shadow grave ability. 3 shadowy humanoid figures emerged beside him, their forms flickering like smoke. They moved in unison, attacking the creatures with ruthless precision. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the shadowy figures clashed with the octopus-headed beasts. Tentacles writhed and lashed out, but the shadows moved like phantoms, evading and countering with swift, brutal strikes. One of the creatures lunged for Asher, its maw opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. He sidestepped the attack, bringing his scythe down in a deadly arc that cleaved the creature in 2. Another tried to flank him, but one of the shadow figures intercepted it, plunging a blade of pure darkness into its chest. Despite their efforts, the remaining creatures continued to press the attack. Asher could feel his stamina waning, his movements becoming slower, more labored. The acidic wounds on his body throbbed, and his breaths came in shallow gasps. I'm at my limit, he thought grimly, but even as the thought crossed his mind, a surge of energy erupted from deep within him. The absorbed essences from earlier battles ignited, swirling through his veins like molten fire. His aura flared, dark and golden hues intertwining as his power reached a breaking point. The oppressive energy of the Colosseum seemed to resonate with him, amplifying his transformation. I have broken through the mid-stage of silver rank, Asher mumbled as he sensed the increase in power, but it was not enough against the thing sitting on the throne. When the light faded, Asher stood taller, his wounds partially healed, his eyes glowing with a fierce silvery light. His scythe had transformed, its blade longer and sharper, pulsating with raw energy. The shadows around him seemed denser, more alive, as if responding to his newfound strength. I've broken through, Asher said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Time to end this. With a single leap, he closed the distance between himself and the creatures. His scythe moved like a whirlwind, carving through their defenses with ease. Each strike was precise, each movement calculated, as if he had become one with the weapon. The last of the creatures let out a final desperate screech before dissolving into ash. Asher stood amidst the aftermath, his golden aura still shimmering faintly. He turned his gaze toward the bat-like creature on the throne, who now regarded him with a mix of amusement and interest. "Interesting," the creature said, leaning forward slightly. "You've grown stronger, but you're still far from ready to face me." Asher smirked, gripping his scythe tightly. "We'll see about that." The bat-like creature stood once again, this time pointing directly at Asher with an amused smirk. "I'll give you 3 free strikes," it said mockingly, its voice deep and resonant. "Attack with all your might. After that, it'll be my turn." Asher's blood boiled as he heard the creature's taunts, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Very well," he replied, his voice steady. Bringing his palms together, he began channeling the full force of his bloodline abilities. While Asher's primary power was his sanguine supreme, he also possessed 2 lesser abilities, black lightning and necromancy. Though these were weaker compared to his dominant bloodline power, Asher decided to unleash everything he had. If the creature wanted him to strike with his full might, then he wouldn't hold back. In his hands 3 distinct orbs began to form, one of crimson red, pulsating like blood, one of dark gray swirling with necrotic energy, and one of pitch black crackling with lightning. The orbs fused together, creating a volatile, oscillating sphere of immense destructive energy. "Dread blast," Asher roared as he thrust his palms forward, releasing the attack. The tricolored beam of destruction surged toward the creature, tearing through the ground as it traveled. The bat-like creature didn't flinch. With a wave of its hand, dark energy condensed in front of it, forming a barrier shaped like a black diamond. The dread blast collided with the shield, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Cracks appeared on the barrier, but it held firm. The creature lowered its barrier, inspecting the minor cracks. It mused, tilting its head. "Better than it looks, but still weak." Asher watched, his heart sinking as the attack dissipated, leaving the creature completely unharmed. "Damn it," he thought. It didn't even faze him. "Is that all you've got?" The creature mocked, crossing its arms again. "I expected more from you. Come on, human. You still have 2 more chances. Don't disappoint me." It waved its hand dismissively, its taunting laughter echoing through the chamber. Asher clenched his fists, his anger bubbling to the surface. He needed a new plan. That attack had been his strongest move, and it hadn't even scratched the creature. What now? He thought desperately. Read exclusive adventures at my virtual library empire. Then it hit him, weakness. Everyone had one, no matter how strong they appeared. Asher's eyes widened slightly as he remembered one of his lesser-used skills, absolute appraisal. This skill was a system cheat, allowing him to uncover every single detail about his target, regardless of rank or power difference. No one could detect when he used it, making it an invaluable tool for situations like this. Though he primarily used it to appraise items, he had never faced an opponent where it might be necessary, until now. Taking a deep breath, Asher activated absolute appraisal. His vision blurred momentarily as the world around him shifted. The creature's form began to glow faintly, and countless details flooded his mind. Its strengths, its weaknesses, its abilities, all were laid bare before him. And then he saw it. Everything about him, even his weakness, laid before his eyes. Dark Void Bat King. Realm, Platinum, Pseudo-King. Description: an ambitious creature who betrayed his own master for power, he stole his kingship, though it was stolen not from self-enlightenment he only reached a pseudo-king rank. Weakness: the throne is the only weakness of this creature, the symbol of Bat Emperor he plundered by treachery. Once destroyed he will be hit hard, reducing his power by 50% permanently and by 80% for 30 seconds due to backlash. Asher's mind raced as the details unfolded before his eyes. The bat-like creature was no mere opponent, it was the Dark Void Bat King, a being of immense power, on the precipice of true kingship. But there it was, plain as day, its weakness. The throne. The ornate structure, carved from obsidian and etched with glowing crimson runes, wasn't just a seat, it was a stolen symbol of power, a relic the creature had plundered in an act of betrayal. Destroying it would inflict devastating backlash, cutting its power in half permanently and leaving it vulnerable for a crucial 30 seconds. Asher's breath quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. This is my chance, he thought. He couldn't overpower the creature directly, but if he could focus on the throne, the tides would turn. The creature shifted on its throne, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You've been quiet," it said, its voice laced with amusement. Have you realized how hopeless this fight is? Or are you planning something clever? Asher didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted his stance, gripping his scythe tightly. The creature's taunts were irrelevant now, his target was clear. Fine, the Dark Void Bat King continued, rising from the throne with a lazy stretch. 2 more strikes, human. Impress me. Asher smirked. I only need 1. In a sudden burst of speed, he dashed forward, but not directly at the creature. His movements were calculated, weaving and feinting to mask his true intent. The Bat King's crimson eyes tracked him, and its lips curled into a predatory grin. Still dancing around, are we? It sneered. You'll have to do better than that. Asher's scythe glowed with a sinister red aura as he poured everything into his next attack. His bloodline abilities surged, blending his sanguine supreme with the raw destructive force of his necromancy and black lightning. The air crackled with energy, the chamber trembling under the weight of his power. With a mighty leap, Asher twisted mid-air, aiming his strike, not at the Bat King, but at the throne behind it. The creature's grin faltered as realization dawned. What? Too late. Asher's scythe cleaved through the air, its edge blazing with a tricolored energy. The blade struck the throne with a deafening crack, shattering its surface. A shockwave erupted, sending chunks of obsidian and crimson runes flying in all directions. The Bat King let out an ear-splitting roar, clutching its chest as dark energy erupted from its body. The backlash was immediate and violent. Its once dominant aura flickered and dimmed, and its towering form seemed to shrink, its movements sluggish and unsteady. You dare, the creature growled, staggering as the effects of the backlash rippled through it. Asher landed gracefully, a smirk playing on his lips. 1 more strikes left, right? He said mockingly. I think I'll make it count. Try to blocks it 1 more time, Asher said as his hands come together once again as he launched another dread blast. Under the weight of the backlash, the Bat King tried to summon his dark energy for a counterattack. However, the feedback from the shattered throne surged through him, causing even more internal damage. He coughed up black blood, his body trembling as his power crumbled. Just as he tried one final act of defiance, the dread blast reached his face. His final desperate word escaped his lips, F-fuck. The tricolored ray struck with devastating force, disintegrating his upper body and ending his life. Asher stood motionless, watching as the creature's remains crumbled into ash. The oppressive aura that had filled the chamber dissipated, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Catherine landed softly beside him, her golden hair shimmering faintly in the dim light. How did you know? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. That the throne was his weakness? Even I didn't notice it. Asher turned to her, his expression calm but weary. I could sense it, he replied. The throne was connected to him, almost like an extension of his body. I didn't know for sure it was his weakness, but it felt significant. Catherine crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. What if you were wrong? She asked pointedly. Asher shrugged, his tone nonchalant. I didn't know, he admitted. But he said he'd give me 3 chances. I wasn't about to waste one. Catherine sighed, shaking her head with a small smirk. You're either incredibly lucky or insanely reckless, she muttered, though there was a hint of admiration in her voice. Asher simply nodded, his gaze returning to the remnants of the shattered throne. Maybe both, he said quietly. Suddenly, the space around them began to quake violently. Asher instinctively steadied himself, his eyes darting around to find the source. At the center of the chamber, cracks began to spiderweb across the ground. From the fissure, a faint glow emerged, and a perfectly round orb floated upward. The orb was the size of a basketball, its surface shimmering with an iridescent light that seemed to pulse rhythmically. Asher stared at it, his brow furrowed in curiosity. What is that? He asked, his voice steady but laced with intrigue. Catherine stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the floating object. That is the core of this space, she explained. You can call it the dungeon core. Asher tilted his head slightly. What's it used for? He asked, keeping his eyes on the orb. Catherine crossed her arms and replied, You can absorb it to advance in rank. It also comes with a small chance, about 10%, to gain a unique skill tied to the dungeon's nature. Hearing this, Asher nodded thoughtfully. Without hesitation, he stored the dungeon core in his spatial ring. I'll check it later, he said, while inwardly adding. I'll use absolute appraisal first to make sure it's safe and understand it fully before doing anything. Catherine smirked at his cautious approach. Smart move. Most people would have rushed to absorb it immediately. Asher gave a faint smile. Rushing gets you killed. I'd rather take my time and make sure I'm not walking into a trap. Emerging from the now simple well, Asher and Catherine were greeted by Freya, who stood waiting for them outside. Asher's sharp eyes immediately caught something different about her. There was a new aura surrounding her, subtle yet distinct. "What happened to you?" he asked, narrowing his gaze as he tried to piece together the change. Freya smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I tried my luck with the Blood Crown Legacy," she said nonchalantly. Asher's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He turned to Catherine for confirmation. Catherine nodded, her expression calm but faintly amused. "Since you were busy, I let her attempt the legacy of my family," she explained. "It's rare for outsiders to have a chance, but got one after giving it a shot." Asher studied Freya for a moment longer, noting the slight crimson tint to her eyes and the faint, pulsating energy around her.
"I see. Did you succeed?"
Freya shrugged. "I gained something, but not everything. It's a tough legacy, even for someone like me."
Catherine smirked.
"It's impressive that she managed to get even a part of it. Most are outright rejected or worse. But it is still with you. As you progress and show your worth, you will get the rest of it," she said, looking at her as Freya nodded with a smile. Turning back to Asher, Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to try it as well?" Asher considered her offer, tapping his chin in thought. After a moment he replied, "I would like to see it first."
"See it?
Not take it?" Catherine asked, her curiosity piqued. "Yes," Asher said firmly. "I want to understand it before I make any decisions." Catherine chuckled softly.
"Fair enough.
Very few approach the Blood Crown Legacy with such caution. Let's see if your patience will pay off." Freya crossed her arms, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Just don't take too long deciding, Asher. Who knows how long it'll remain open for another attempt." With a nod, Asher gestured for Catherine to lead the way, determined to uncover the truth behind the legacy that bore such a formidable reputation. She picked up Terence, who has fallen asleep at some point, and then snapped her fingers as the space around them shifted and they were brought back to same hall just outside of the legacy room. Asher took a moment to absorb the immense aura of the Blood Crown Legacy Chamber. The sheer power resonating through the air was staggering, and he couldn't help but admire the intricate barriers woven into the very fabric of the place. Any intruder foolish enough to breach these walls would be annihilated so completely that not even their ashes would remain. Catherine approached him with a small vial of her blood. "Here, take this. My blood will grant you temporary access to my aura and let you interact with the legacy." Asher accepted the vial without hesitation, but instead of drinking it, he focused his abilities to assimilate it directly into his bloodstream. A faint crimson glow surrounded him as the process completed. Catherine raised an eyebrow but nodded approvingly. "That works too.
Efficient."
She stepped forward and placed her hand on the Blood Crown symbol etched into the chamber door. The symbol pulsed with life, and moments later, the massive doors swung open with a deep, resonant creak, revealing the grandeur within. Rows upon rows of beautifully crafted coffins stretched out in an almost endless array, each exuding an aura of history, power, and secrets long forgotten. Asher stood in awe, but his moment of admiration was interrupted by a sudden notification ringing in his mind. Conditions for fifth cheat met. Own a grand legacy chamber containing more than 100 legacies. His eyes widened in disbelief.
"This whole chamber?"
"It's part of my cheat now?" he thought, his mind racing. It hadn't appeared before, likely due to his lack of awareness after he formed bond to the dark existence realm, and was not aware of this place. Catherine's voice pulled him back to reality.
"Go on, look around.
Familiarize yourself with the chamber," she said, her tone calm yet encouraging. Asher nodded, stepping further into the chamber. As he moved, another notification appeared. Hall of Legacy activated. Description: the Hall of Legacy records all legacies from the worlds the host has visited. The host may collect any legacy knowledge at any time. However, physical items or artifacts left behind by legacy holders must be obtained from their respective locations. Note: the Hall of Legacy also provides guidance on how to acquire any legacy. Asher's eyes gleamed as he processed the information. This wasn't just a collection of coffins like this chamber, it was a vast repository of knowledge and power from countless worlds. "So, it's like a library of legacies," he murmured to himself, "but to truly benefit, I'd need to claim the physical items separately." He clenched his fists, excitement surging through him. With the Hall of Legacy, he could potentially gain an unparalleled edge in his journey. Catherine noticed his expression and smiled faintly. "Impressive, isn't it? The Blood Crown Legacy is unlike anything else. Few have the will to claim it, let alone understand its full scope." Asher gave her a small nod. "It's more than impressive. Your family surely has a rich history." Although Catherine talked about this blood-crowned chamber thinking Asher is awe of this, not knowing it's due to something else entirely, Asher still praised as having this much legacies meant her family was truly great and an ancient family. So, would you like to inherit one? She asked as Asher nodded. I will, he said as he used his absolute appraisal to look at the centermost coffin. First part of coffin of the progenitor. Time, as mortals knew it, was irrelevant to him. Long before the stars first burned in the heavens, before the concept of days and nights was born, the vampire progenitor existed. His power was unmatched, his presence a force that could mold worlds to his will. He was no ordinary immortal, he was one of the primordials, beings born from the raw fabric of creation, whose existence shaped the universe itself. As a progenitor, he became the fountainhead of the vampire race. Their strengths, their weaknesses, even their undying thirst for blood, all stemmed from him. To his children, he was a god. To the rest of creation, he was an enigma. But for all his might, the progenitor was cursed. What many coveted as the ultimate blessing, immortality, was to him the heaviest of burdens. Ages passed. Stars were born, lived, and died. Civilizations rose and fell. Yet he remained, unchanged, unmoved. Time was meaningless to him, a relentless cycle from which he could not escape. He yearned for what even the weakest mortal could embrace, true death. For nonillion trillions of years, the progenitor sought an end to his existence. His immortality was not the mere resilience of the body, nor was it bound to the soul. It was absolute. Neither the ravages of time nor the most destructive forces in existence could touch him. He traversed dimensions, explored forgotten realms, and even stood before the primordial abyss where existence and nothingness intertwined. Yet, death eluded him. It was after another billion years of relentless pursuit that he found a glimmer of hope, a possibility so profound it seemed almost cruel. If he could relinquish the powers that made him what he was, the core of his being, he might finally sever the chains binding him to eternity. The progenitor's power was not singular, it was a symphony of forces, each one capable of shaping reality itself. These were his 7 absolute attributes, primordial abilities that defined his existence and set him apart from all other beings. In an act of unimaginable sacrifice, he chose to divide himself. 7 distinct parts of his essence were encapsulated into coffins, each carrying one of his absolute attributes. These attributes were more than mere powers, they were forces of nature, the very building blocks of creation. Each coffin was then cast into the vastness of creation, hidden within different worlds, scattered across time and space. These coffins would seek out worthy inheritors, individuals capable of wielding the immense power without succumbing to its weight. Only when all 7 attributes were claimed and fully mastered could the progenitor achieve what he desired most, freedom through death. Each of the 7 absolute attributes represented a cornerstone of the progenitor's essence. Predation, the ability to consume and assimilate the essence of anything, absorbing its power and evolving endlessly. Dominion, a power to command all creation, bending wills, controlling elements, and subjugating the very laws of existence. Void, the embodiment of nothingness, capable of erasing matter, energy, and even the very concept of existence. Read chapters at my virtual library empire. Blood sovereignty, supreme mastery over blood, not only of vampires but of all living beings, allowing unparalleled control over life itself. Temporal supremacy, authority over time, enabling the wielder to halt, rewind, or accelerate its flow at will. Primordial creation, the power to birth life and forge worlds, rivaling the gods themselves. Eternal insight, infinite knowledge and understanding of all things, granting clarity beyond even the divine. Asher got amazed as he looked at the details of the grand coffin, but how it ended up here? He wondered as he continued to use his absolute appraisal. The coffins were not relics to be stumbled upon by chance. They were dormant, waiting for those who could pass the trials they held. These trials tested strength, willpower, and the very essence of a soul, for the powers they contained were not meant for the weak or the unworthy. Over sextillion years, only one attribute, predation, had been claimed. Its inheritor was not a grand warrior nor a wise sage, but a mere slime. Yet this simple creature, through sheer determination and the boundless potential granted by predation, evolved into a world-devouring slime, feared across countless realms. The remaining 6 coffins remained untouched, hidden within the folds of existence, awaiting those who could rise to their challenge. One is already claimed. Asher got astonished, yet he sighed in relief. Fortunately it's only one, but it seemed to be one of the most powerful one, Asher thought as he continued to see the coffin history. At the heart of this legacy lies the coffin of the progenitor, a central artifact binding the 7 coffins together. It is more than a repository of power, it is a monument to his eternal struggle and a key to his ultimate goal. When all 7 attributes are claimed, the coffin of the progenitor will awaken, allowing his remaining essence to merge with his inheritors. This final act will sever his connection to the primordial forces that sustain him, granting him the release he has sought for eons. To inherit one of the progenitor's attributes is to embrace a destiny fraught with peril. These powers are not mere gifts, they are responsibilities. Each attribute shapes its wielder, influencing their thoughts, desires, and even their very being. Mastering these powers requires not only strength but also unparalleled wisdom. The price of failure is madness, corruption, or worse, a fate even the progenitor could not foresee. The story of the progenitor is not one of glory, but of a being's desperate pursuit of peace. For those who seek his legacy, the question is not whether they can claim it, but whether they can bear the burden of what it means to wield it. When the last inheritor claims the final attribute, the progenitor's true death will come. But this event will not be quiet or unnoticed. The passing of such a being, and the act of transferring his essence, will shake the very foundations of reality. The progenitor's fate is now tied to those who inherit his legacy. They are not just bearers of immense power, they are stewards of his final wish. Whether they bring about a new age of prosperity or plunge existence into chaos, their choices will shape the fate of all creation. The coffin of the progenitor remains, waiting for its inheritors. The question is not when they will come, but whether they will be ready for the responsibility that awaits them. Asher stopped as the next part is about the ability this coffin holds. I hope it's not insight or blood one, he thought as he took a deep breath and then read the next part. This coffin holds the ability of primordial creation. Phew, Asher sighed in relief as he also read the part how to obtain it, and then he went near the progenitor coffin. He cut his palm and he placed it on the coffin, and then he closed his eyes as he guided his blood inside it, as he moved his blood and began to write something all over the coffin with his blood. What is he doing? Freya asked as Catherine frowned and wondered too. I don't know that language, it was not in your memories, he said as Freya nodded. Yeah, I don't know it too. Find more chapters on my virtual library empire. But he seemed to know what he's doing? Freya said, as Catherine nodded. Even I don't know what he's doing with the coffin. Huh? You don't know either? Freya asked, surprised. She had assumed Catherine would know, but apparently, she didn't. Then we can only wait, Freya said, and Catherine nodded. I just hope he doesn't destroy it, Catherine added. Relax, Freya reassured her. Asher isn't that reckless. He's probably trying to obtain the legacy of the progenitor. Catherine simply nodded and glanced toward Asher, who was deep in concentration. On Asher's side, he had reached the point where he had covered the entire coffin in the language of the primordials. He didn't understand the language himself but was merely copying and pasting what the Hall of Legacy had instructed him to. Soon, the coffin was completely covered in intricate characters. As he drew the final stroke, Asher stepped back and let the magic do its work. The symbols on the coffin began to light up one by one. Before long, the entire coffin was enveloped in glowing red runes resembling ancient words. The runes continued to illuminate in sequence until the final one lit up. The whole coffin shone like a radiant beacon, its glow intensifying with every passing moment. Finally, a portal appeared in the midst of the light. Asher nodded, satisfied with the result, and stepped forward into the portal. This portal led to the inheritance space, a realm where the coffin could only pass on its legacy if one possessed the token of the progenitor. However, the alternative method was to forcefully unlock it using the language of the primordials. Upon entering, he looked up to see a red sky and down to find a liquid-like ground. The surface resembled a vast mirror, reflecting the crimson sky below. He nodded to himself, then cut his palm once again and began walking forward while chanting in a strange, ancient language. His voice resonated through the inheritance space, causing tremors to ripple across the mirrored ground as if an earthquake had been unleashed. As he advanced, the quakes intensified until the liquid surface beneath his feet churned violently, like a tsunami forming beneath him. The waves surged upward and lashed back down, occasionally striking him. The acidic liquid burned his skin, but Asher gritted his teeth and pressed forward, unwavering in his determination. The corrosive water had long since reduced his clothing to ashes, leaving him exposed and scarred, but he continued to move step by step until he reached the center of the space. Standing there, he resumed his chanting. The echoing words stirred the world around him, causing the churning liquid to spiral like a colossal whirlpool. From beneath his feet, an altar began to rise, its form emerging slowly but steadily as it lifted him toward the sky. Alternatively, the sky above cracked open, and from it, another altar emerged. Asher, now ascending into the sky, paused as the second altar descended to his position. The two altars released a dome of energy that enclosed him completely. Still, Asher did not stop chanting. Standing at the crossroads of the dome's energy, he continued to recite the ancient language. From above, a red-crimson liquid began to pour down, while from the altar beneath his feet, another stream of the same crimson liquid surged upward. The space within the dome started to fill, and soon it was completely submerged in the glowing crimson liquid. Despite the suffocating liquid enveloping him, Asher persevered, chanting without faltering. The energy within the liquid began to drill into him, penetrating his very being. The immense energy surged into his soul, where his abilities were engraved. Within his soul, the crimson liquid started to shape itself, forming a mysterious symbol of unknown origin. Asher recognized it immediately. It was the mark of the primordial creation ability, etched into his soul with intricate detail. This was the inheritance he had sought, and now, it was becoming a part of him. Time passed, and a whole week went by before the symbol on Asher's soul was fully formed and completely engraved. Only then did he fully integrate the ability. Asher opened his eyes and finally ceased chanting. He took a deep breath, noticing that the altars were now cracked and seemed on the verge of collapse. The once brilliant surroundings had grown dim, signaling the ritual's end. He jumped out from between the altars, drawing his sword as he did so. Channeling the newly gained ability into his blade, a cosmic energy enveloped it, glowing with a vibrant, otherworldly light. With one swift strike, Asher unleashed a cosmic slash. The attack didn't destroy the altars but merged with them, causing the structures to shudder. Moments later, both altars began to crumble like fragile chips, revealing two ancient-looking grimoires within. The Grimoire of Creation, Asher muttered, picking up the first book. It detailed the full scope of his newly acquired ability, including spells designed to complement its powers. The second book, however, was about the language of the primordials. Asher glanced at it briefly but dismissed it. He already possessed a means of learning the primordial language, rendering the book less useful to him. Satisfied with his gains, Asher stood amidst the ruins of the altars, his soul now carrying the mark of the primordial creation ability. Asher stepped out of the collapsing altars, the grimoire of creation in his hand, and his soul alight with the power of primordial creation. The air shimmered around him, heavy with a presence that felt both ancient and intimate, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed within the inheritance space. You have come at last." Startled, Asher turned his gaze to the center of the collapsing realm, where the crimson liquid began to converge into a humanoid form. The figure took shape slowly, revealing a tall man with pale skin, jet-black hair streaked with silver, and crimson eyes that burned with an otherworldly glow. He wore regal attire, a mixture of dark armor and flowing crimson robes, and atop his head sat a crown made of blood-red energy that pulsed with vitality. "I am the first blood crown," the figure said, his voice laced with power and melancholy. "A fragment of the progenitor, left behind to guide and judge those who seek my inheritance. You are not the first to stand before me, but you are different." Asher met the being's gaze, his hand instinctively tightening around his sword. "Who are you truly? And what do you mean by the progenitor's fragments?" The first blood crown's expression softened, and he gestured for Asher to sit on the platform that had formed beneath them. Asher hesitated but complied, sensing no hostility from the ancient being. The first blood crown then began to tell the story of the progenitor which Asher already knew, but he acted like amazed from time to time, giving impression he is hearing it for the first time. "I am unlike the other fragments," the blood crown began. "When I was cast out from the progenitor's being, I drifted for unknown years before I finally find a place where I can pass this ability I carry. I fell into this world, a place rich with life, struggle, and beauty. In my aimless wanderings, I encountered a woman of the vampire race. Her name was Valeria." At the mention of her name, the blood crown's crimson eyes flickered with warmth and pain. "She was unlike any being I had ever encountered. Strong-willed, kind, and unyielding, she saw me not as a fragment of a god but as a man lost in his own eternity. Against all odds, I fell in love." Asher raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the rare glimpse into the progenitor's humanity. "We built a life together," the blood crown continued. "For centuries we shared joys and sorrows, and in time, I used my power of primordial creation to forge a gift for her and our descendants, a supreme lineage ability, the blood crown. It was a manifestation of my love for her, a legacy that would grant our family unparalleled strength and unity." Asher listened intently as the being's voice grew heavier with emotion. "But even with all my power, I could not defy the natural order. Mortality claimed her, as it claims all. I could not follow her into the embrace of death, for I was bound by the progenitor's curse of eternity. When she passed, I returned to what I once was, a fragment, a remnant will. I could no longer remain among her descendants as their leader or their kin. I became their guardian, watching from the shadows, ensuring that the blood crown lineage remained unbroken." The first blood crown paused, his gaze distant. Yet even my presence began to fade as my descendants grew strong and independent. I retreated into this coffin, waiting for the one who could inherit not just my power, but my memories, my will, and my desire to protect those they love. Asher leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. And you believe I am that person? The Blood Crown's piercing eyes met his, scrutinizing him with an intensity that made Asher feel as if his very soul was laid bare. You carry the mark of primordial creation. You have faced the trials of this place and emerged victorious. But power alone is not enough. The Blood Crown is not just a weapon or a tool, it is a legacy built on love, sacrifice, and the unyielding will to protect what matters most. The air around them grew heavy as the Blood Crown rose to his full height. Prove to me that you understand this. Show me that you are worthy of carrying not just my power, but the essence of my heart. With a wave of his hand, the first Blood Crown summoned a trial unlike any Asher had faced before. Shadows coalesced into forms resembling Valeria, his descendants, and countless others he had sworn to protect in his long existence. Each shadow was an embodiment of their struggles, their pain, and their hopes. If you wish to inherit my power, you must face their truths and accept their burdens as your own. Only then will you be worthy of the Blood Crown. Asher stood, his expression firm. I am not selfless to carry countless lives on me, but I do know that no matter what I will protect the ones I love. Good, that's exactly I want, but words are not enough, Fragment said as he unleashed the army at him. The trial began, and Asher plunged into the memories of the first Blood Crown, facing the echoes of love, loss, and responsibility that had defined the progenitor Fragment's existence. Asher's surroundings shifted, plunging him into the heart of the first Blood Crown's memories. The crimson light dimmed, replaced by scenes of vivid life, a bustling village nestled beneath a canopy of ancient trees. Stay updated through my virtual library empire. He stood as a silent observer, watching the memory unfold. There was Valeria, a striking woman with silver hair and crimson eyes, her presence commanding yet gentle. She moved among her people, helping, laughing, and exuding a warmth that seemed to brighten the entire village. The first Blood Crown in this memory was no regal figure but a man cloaked in simple attire, standing at her side. His gaze lingered on her with an intensity that spoke of love deeper than words could express. Asher could feel the Fragment's emotions radiating from the scene, a mixture of happiness, longing, and an underlying dread. Suddenly, the memory shifted violently. The village was aflame, the vibrant laughter replaced by screams. Vampiric warriors fought desperately against an invading force of monstrous creatures that seemed born of chaos itself. Valeria, a beacon of power and grace, stood at the forefront, her blade drenched in the ichor of her enemies. The first Blood Crown fought beside her, wielding his unmatched power to shield their people. But even gods and warriors have limits. Asher watched in horror as Valeria, despite her strength, was struck down. The chaos surged forward, overwhelming the defenders, and the scene dissolved into darkness. You see now, the first Blood Crown's voice echoed in the void. The burden of failure. Even with all the power I possessed, I could not save her. I could not protect what I held dear. The darkness gave way to another scene. Centuries later, Valeria's descendants thrived, their Blood Crown lineage ensuring they stood as rulers among the vampires. The first Blood Crown watched them from the shadows, his heart heavy with pride and sorrow. He was their silent protector, their unseen guardian. But as time passed, even his presence began to wane. His descendants, though powerful, no longer needed him. He was a relic of a past they barely remembered. Asher was abruptly pulled back to the present. The crimson liquid from earlier reappeared, swirling around him. The shadows from the trial began to rise again, taking the forms of Valeria, her descendants, and the villagers he had failed to save. Their voices echoed in the space, accusing him, questioning him, pleading with him to answer for their fates. Will you bear the weight of their hopes and their pain? The Blood Crown's voice asked. Will you wield this power not for yourself, but for those who look to you for salvation? Asher gritted his teeth, the weight of their gazes pressing down on him like a physical force. I will, he said firmly. Power without purpose is meaningless. I've faced loss, I've carried burdens, and I've made mistakes. But I've never stopped moving forward. If this legacy is built on love and responsibility, then I will honor it. The shadows surged toward him, merging with the crimson liquid. The energy engulfed Asher, burning through his soul, testing his resolve. His vision blurred as he felt the essence of the Blood Crown entering his very being. The memories, the emotions, the hopes of an entire lineage poured into him, threatening to overwhelm his mind. But Asher held firm. He embraced the pain, the loss, and the love, allowing them to become a part of him. When the light finally subsided, Asher stood alone. The first Blood Crown's figure reappeared before him, his expression softened with approval. You have done what few could, the Blood Crown said. You carry not just my power, but my will. Remember this, Blood Crown is not a weapon for destruction, it is a shield, a promise to protect those you love. Wield it wisely, for its power comes with a price. You have done what few could, the Blood Crown said. You carry not just my power, but my will. Remember this, Blood Crown is not a weapon for destruction, it is a shield, a promise to protect those you love. Wield it wisely, for its power comes with a price. The Blood Crown stepped forward, placing a hand on Asher's chest. A blazing mark appeared there, a crimson crown surrounded by intricate patterns symbolizing creation and unity. The mark pulsed with energy, signifying the completion of the inheritance. This is my gift to you, the supreme ability. I created the Blood Crown of Eternity, the first Blood Crown said. May you succeed where I failed. Protect what you hold dear, and may your path lead to a brighter future. The first Blood Crown's form began to dissolve, his essence returning to the ether. Thank you for granting me peace, his voice whispered as he disappeared completely. Asher stood in silence, the mark on his chest glowing faintly. He clenched his fists, feeling the immense power coursing through him, the Blood Crown lineage now his to wield. When the space around him began to crumble, Asher's vision blurred, and he found himself back in the real world. Freya and Catherine were waiting, their expressions filled with curiosity and concern. Asher, Freya called out, stepping forward. What happened? He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I've inherited the first Blood Crown, he said, his voice calm. And with it, the responsibility to protect what matters most. Though his words were simple, they carried the weight of the legacy he had just embraced, a legacy that was actually part of a greater whole, and he now aimed to acquire the remaining fragments as well. Though none of the other fragments exist on Volarisa, instead, they lie scattered across other worlds. I am too weak to travel to other worlds right now, he thought as his gaze shifted to Freya. I think we've had enough adventure here. Let's return, he said, his voice steady. Freya nodded in agreement. Asher then looked at Catherine. Do you want to come with us? He asked, surprising her. Will you allow me to come to your world? She asked cautiously, her uncertainty evident. I think you've lingered here long enough, and it was never your fate to remain in this place, he replied, his tone calm but firm. Turning to leave, he added, just come with us. Freya watched the exchange closely, her mind racing. Just what is he thinking? She wondered. Did the legacy memories change him? She thought after all it's not new, as whenever one inherits a legacy, the memories accompanied it gets inherited too, and it results in somewhat different behavior patterns in individuals. Some matures, some ended up becoming evil or good depending on the legacy. But isn't it a good thing, she thought as she looked at Asher. I don't know, but before, he would have simply dismissed Catherine entirely. He wouldn't have gone out of his way to ask her to come along, she mused, her thoughts circling back to his earlier behavior. Perhaps the infusion of the first Blood Crown's memories had influenced him. The legacy of an epic yet tragic existence might have begun to temper his once cold and distant personality, if only slightly. Asher, not paying attention to anyone else, simply snapped his fingers. The realm gateway manifested once again, a swirling portal of cosmic energy. Catherine looked at it for a moment before stepping inside, following Asher. Freya entered shortly after, pausing to glance at Terence, who was now lying on a small bed. She hesitated and finally asked, "What about Terence?" Catherine shook her head, her expression calm but tinged with sadness. She sleeps for sustained stretches of years due to her injuries. She only wakes up for 2 or 3 hours every decade. You were fortunate to arrive during one of those rare moments, or perhaps she woke sensing someone connected to her, Catherine explained. Asher nodded thoughtfully at this revelation. The three of them emerged from the portal into Asher's academy room. Freya looked around, taking in the environment with curiosity. It's good to be back, she said, taking a deep breath. This is your room in a academy? Catherine asked on the other hand. Yes, it's in the World Academy, Asher replied. It's a powerful academy where only the most gifted are allowed to enter.